Meeting for May 6, 2014 to order. We'll stand for a moment of silent reflection. The Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Ken Davis.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we address the agenda, I would like to ask Presiding Judge Jeff Davis, is there a difference between a cell phone going off in a meeting and a fire alarm?
Probably doing us either way. Okay, didn't know it.
Okay, just wanted to clear that up.
Somebody burning popcorn again? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that was one of my stats.
Okay, next item is the
Machine too that says popcorn.
review and the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes they wish to make to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is the consent agenda. Holly?
Good morning, Holly Hennies, Commission Office Manager. For public notice, the Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine items quickly. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. Today, the consent agenda contains the following items. Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of April 15th, 2014. Approval of the vouchers in the amount of $2,079,829.02. That amount also includes a little over $1.9 million in bond payments. To set and approve the civil township bonds for treasurers and clerks as submitted by the auditor's office. To acknowledge the order of organization and incorporation of the Old Deerfield Road District for the tax year 2014 and after, as submitted by the auditor's office. Number 9 is to order the election be held on June 16th, 2014 at 7 p.m. for the determination of the organization of the Clear Creek Number 2 Road District, as submitted by the auditor's office. Number 10 is approval of the South Dakota DOT Joint Powers Agreement for weed spraying services, as submitted by the Weed and Pest Department. And finally, number 11 is approval of the SD-DOT Railroad Joint Powers Agreement for weed spraying services, as submitted by the Weed and Pest Department.
Thank you. Does anyone wish any of the consent agenda items removed?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second on the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is item 12, and I haven't forewarned him, but I'm going to ask Commissioner Holloway to read the proclamation, if you would, please.
Sure.
This is a proclamation for the Pennington County Corrections Week, May 4th through May 10th, 2014. Whereas May 4th through May 10th, 2014 will be celebrated across the United States as National Correctional Officers Week, and whereas the corrections profession is one of the most challenging professions one can pursue, it is also one of the most noble. Correctional staff help keep our citizens and our communities safe, not simply by securing jails and juvenile detention facilities and offenders confined there. Correctional officers serve admirably throughout the Pennington County Jail and Juvenile Services Center as custody officers, counselors, teachers, chaplains, healthcare professionals, support staff, supervisors, and commanders. They are among the most capable, committed, patient, and persistent public service in our nation. And whereas Few truly understand the difficulties and challenges these correctional professionals face daily, often at personal risk. They are given those who incur in dangerous and addictive behaviors, along with the responsibility to reform and rehabilitate. They are given society's illiterate, unskilled, and the task to educate. They are given those who lack medical care or who are in poor health and must help make them well. They are given the mentally ill and the responsibility to diagnose, treat, and protect. Correctional staff are in a position to offer offenders a better example and a new path. These staff do so with limited resources and often with little awareness or acknowledgement from those outside the field of corrections. Yet correctional employees continue to rise to the challenge time and again. And whereas it is appropriate to honor the correctional staff in our Pennington County Correctional Facilities for their invaluable contribution to our society. Now therefore, we, the Board of County Commissioners, County of Pennington, do hereby proclaim the week of May 4th through May 10th, 2014 as Pennington County Correctional Week, and encourage the citizens of Pennington County to share in acknowledging the outstanding job the Pennington County Corrections staff perform on a daily basis in serving the entire community. Dated this 15th day of April 2014, the Board of County Commissioners of Pennington County, Lindell Peterson, Chairman.
That's a resolution proclamation we passed earlier to officially commemorate this week. Sheriff Tome, we have your staff here. We're honored to have them, and would you have any remarks?
Well, first, thank you for acknowledging the correctional staff for Pennington County. They do difficult work, and frankly, most of it goes unseen because it is literally behind closed doors, and they deal with suicide attempts, mental health, physical health issues, and it's a very high needs population. And I do have Joe Gutierrez, a commander from the Juvenile Services Center, and Lieutenant Peggy Severson from the jail, and I guess I'd ask them to come up and just introduce the correctional staff that are here real briefly, and then we'll continue on. So thank you for acknowledging them.
Thank you for having us here today. What I'd like to do is, they don't always get a chance to say something, so I'd like them to introduce themselves as we go through. Lieutenant Heather Wood, go ahead and stand up. And then Lauren, go ahead and stand up and introduce yourself, please.
Lauren Gary.
Aaron Becker.
Jeremy Danley. Chad Rossler.
These are the correctional officers at JSC, and thank you for honoring this week.
Good morning, I'm Lieutenant Severson, and I'd like to introduce our staff at the Pennington County Jail. We have Lieutenant Anderson, Corporal Edwards, Officer Flinginger, and Officer Seitz. Thank you.
And Chief Deputy Brian Mueller was incognito. Thank you all very much. Next item is item 13. May 2014 is the National Military Appreciation Month proclamation, and Commissioner Davis, would you care to read that, please?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to, but I'd really like to pass this on to the only veteran that's on the Board of County Commissioners, and I'd like to pass that to Commissioner Buschrood if he would be accepting that.
Why, sure. Whereas the freedom and security that citizens of the United States enjoy today are direct results of the bloodshed and continued vigilance given by the United States Armed Forces over the history of our great nation. And whereas the sacrifices that such members of the United States Armed Forces and of the family members that support them have preserved the liberties that have enriched this nation, making it unique in the world community. And whereas the United States Congress in 2004 passed a resolution proclaiming May as National Military Appreciation Month, calling on all Americans to remember those who gave their lives in defense of freedom and to honor the men and women of all of our armed services who have served and are now serving our country together with their families. Whereas National Military Appreciation Month includes Loyalty Day on May 5th, Victory in Europe Day on May 8th, Military Spouse Appreciation Day May 9th, Armed Forces Day on May 17th, and Memorial Day on May 26th. These days provide an opportunity to learn more about the military members and the families who have given of themselves to support and defend the principles we hold dear. Now therefore, we, the Pennington County Board of Commissioners of Pennington County, South Dakota, do hereby proclaim May 2014 as a special time to show appreciation for our military and proclaim it as National Military Appreciation Month. Encourage all citizens to join us in showing our gratitude by appropriate display of flags and ribbons during the proclaimed month, signed the 6th day of May 2014 at Pennington County, South Dakota, the Pennington Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd make a motion to have your signature affixed to the executive proclamation for National Military Appreciation Month.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Busgrove. Next item is item 14, a lien release request. Who is here to speak to that?
Well, in 2009, August of 2009, I was getting medical attention through the community health clinic. And I was on a sliding scale there, and I had a lot of sinus problems, and they told me that I needed Flonase and that they didn't have any samples. So they said what I could do was go over to the Human Services and do a one-time only, no fee, and that they would pay for it. So that's then all of a sudden, about 5 years later, I get this notice from a collection agency saying that I owed for a bill from 2009. So it took me some time to investigate it and figure out what it was even about. So I'd gone back to the community health clinic, and they told me that no, we do it all the time. That it's a one time that you can only do it. In the last year and a quarter, I've had 3 surgeries, and one was a sinus surgery. So I'm still recouping from that. So I don't know what other questions you might have, but there's just been kind of a mixed story on that.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
I guess, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
My only comment would be, there's nothing free in this world. Somebody has to pay for it.
I understand. I just wish they would have instructed me at that time.
Well, our staff informs us that they did advise you that there would be a lien placed. And so with that, I would make a motion to deny this request.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to deny the request for lien release. Any further comments or discussion?
Well, you know, I'm taking my time off too to come here and take care of this, but I just wish they'd get their story straight.
Okay, any other comments? If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is item 15, which is also a lien release request. Are we doing this telephonically?
You are. Are you there, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
You may proceed and make your comments, sir.
Sir, you could go ahead and make your statement, please.
Oh, okay. I guess this was a bill that I didn't realize I had to pay. If I recall correctly, it was from an IVC that my parents did several years ago. And at the time, they were told that there wouldn't be any charges. And now it's years later, and it's just kind of came to our attention. Since that time, I started a new business. I'm doing fairly well, but any extra financial burden is going to be a little too much for us to handle right now. I've got 2 young children and another one due in July, and I was just hoping that maybe I could get some assistance with that old bill.
Okay, does anyone on the commission wish to respond or make a comment?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is Don Holloway. Obviously, these items cost. You did receive the services. I see it's been collected or turned over to a collection agency. We could, probably the most that we could do is ask the collection agency to hold off, give you an opportunity. Frankly, if you would set up a payment plan with us, for whatever you could pay, it's only $1,100, so if you set up a payment plan of $50 a month, it wouldn't take you too long to get this thing paid off, and we could pull it back from the collection agency.
Sir, do you wish to respond?
Well, I guess, that's not unreasonable, but, I guess my main concern was that, my parents were not informed. They were told at the time that it was since I was unemployed at the time, that there wouldn't be any charges. I guess it was just a surprise to us to get the bill, and if that's the only option, I guess I'll take it. But I was hoping that maybe we could negotiate it down a little bit, or if there was any other options. I've heard that sometimes those can be just forgiven. I guess that's what I was hoping would happen, best case scenario. But, it's up to you guys, and I appreciate any consideration you can give me.
Well, obviously, anything that's forgiven, then the rest of the taxpayers have to pay for that. And if you have the ability to pay, then you should be paying for it. You're the one that received the service. So if you can you agree to a $50 a month payments on this?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay. Okay, my motion would be to deny the request for release and work with this gentleman to set up a payment plan, which could then pull this back from the collection agency.
Second.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next is items from the auditor.
Good morning, Julie Pearson, Pennington County Auditor. Have before you a request for you have set this time for a hearing to supplement the 2014 General Fund John T. Vukovich budget in the amount of $8,012.61 from unassigned fund balance for today's meeting. All the information was given to you prior, and basically what we're doing on this is it was unspent 2013 money that we need to show John T. Vukovich that it didn't go into the black hole of county general. And they don't technically need the spending authority, but we do need to do this action to be able to show them that when we spend the money, it's their money that we're spending, and we've made this bookkeeping entry for them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I think we do this somewhat fairly often with Vukovich
Yes.
funding, do we not? If there are no questions, do we have a motion?
I move to schedule
No.
I'd move to, this is wrong. I'd move to approve the
Approve.
supplement from to the 2014 General Fund, John Bukovich budget in the amount of $8,012.61 from unassigned fund balance from prior year revenues.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Sorry about that, we duplicated the hearing.
That's all right.
Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, item B.
Next item is the transfer of a liquor license. The transfer is going from the Gaslight Restaurant with the owner's name as Vengeance LLC, and it's being transferred in the name of the Gaslight Restaurant, owner's name Big Guys LLC. Fees have been paid.
Any questions or comments?
I'd make a motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item C.
Item C is a new package on-off sale malt beverage and South Dakota Farm wines. This also is for the Gaslight Restaurant. It is a new type of license, and again, the owner's name is Big Guys LLC. All fees have been paid. Need approval.
I move to approve the license for Big Guys LLC, Gaslight Restaurant.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D.
This is a new retail on-off sale wine license for Reptile Gardens. Business name is Reptile Gardens, and need approval.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Make a motion to approve the on-off sale wine license for the Reptile Gardens.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Anyone wish to comment? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item is item 17, fiscal year 2015 budget. And we start with item A from the Sheriff's Department.
Good morning, Kevin Tone, Pennington County Sheriff again. And I also see on 17C as additional information requests from Board of Commissioners. I put this back on here to discuss. Previously, we'd asked for $638,000 of over-collected revenue and unspent budget be used towards jail, laundry, and kitchen needs and our security controls. And we continued that, gave a couple tours for commissioners that wanted additional information, and then wanted to put it back on the agenda so Mike and I could make a plan to move forward with fixing some of those things. But if you want to have that as a part of a broader discussion under C, I guess we can just wait and have the discussion as C, or leave it up to the commission, or I'm not sure what the intent of C is on the agenda. But my request would be to, again, renew the previous request of moving the $638,000 of the collected revenues and unspent budget as previously submitted for, again, the laundry, the kitchen, and security controls.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Sheriff, there's no doubt in my mind after taking the tour of the jail that these things are needed to update the jail and basically make it safe for everybody. The only thing I'm wondering, the question that I have, if we, Julie, if I catch you, I'm not surprising you there, what will this do to our general fund balance, taking this $638,000?
Any money that you take from the existing reserve balance will reduce the approximate $3.8 million that you have to apply against the next year's budget.
Which means an increase
You'll have to increase the funds
or cut
someplace else.
services. Cut.
Or he can budget it during the 2015 budget cycle. The building committee did meet and discuss this to prioritize some of the functions, and that discussion will be coming forward during budget hearings in mid-June.
Again, Sheriff, what are the most pressing things that need to be done, we'll say immediately, compared to the total package? Is there anything there that can be isolated from?
If I just ask a clarification question, are you talking in terms of these three items or just in terms of our request in front of the building committee at this time?
I think just what you have in front of the commission right now. What absolutely needs to be done with this total package?
Well, all three of them need to be done. I mean, there are core functions. It's food, it's laundry, and it's security. It's a core function of what we do at the jail. So I don't think I could prioritize one over the other. They're all three core functions.
Did you guys look at it?
Yeah, we've got it.
Mr. Chair? You know, the building committee had a meeting along with the auditor to kind of go over the total amount of funds that we have as a result of the bonds and what was and is in the cumulative building, and trying to figure out the projects that we should undertake once the administration building is done over there. And you know, obviously one project that needs to be addressed probably next would be the courthouse addition renovation. You know, when we move out of here, there's going to have to be some renovation to parts of this building for new courtrooms, and Mr. Peterson from Buildings and Grounds has been to us before and talked about the entryway to the current courthouse and how that slab that's out there that people walk across is not in the best of shape, and something needs to be done to cover that. And so the building committee, at least tentatively, has said that, you know, that seems to be one of the number one priorities, that we need to use whatever money we got left over. We're estimating that's going to be somewhere around $2 million, but those are just rough figures at this time. Then you know, we got the county highway department out there that has mold in their basement, and they can't use that basement any longer. That and through the buildings and grounds and the highway superintendent and others, this board has heard that presentation that at some point in time we need to build a highway department building. When we sold those bonds, those are the projects that we were talking about, trying to get taken care of. Right now, it's estimated that highway department building would cost about $4 million. And so we say, well, that's probably the second most important thing that we should be undertaking. I did talk to Highway Superintendent Jungi. He said he could provide $2 million out of his reserves towards this project. So that would take $2 million or whatever we got left. Then we have the items that the sheriff has put together, and no doubt those are all important projects that need to be handled. I just had a brief conversation with the sheriff before the meeting started here about trying to prioritize what those are. But once we complete the public, or complete the administration building, we complete the renovation to this courthouse and fixing the front entryway out there, we take $2 million to apply towards the highway department's building, we would have approximately $1.4 million left. We're not sure how far that can go, but that's what's left, and that's what we need to try to figure out. I think the sheriff is trying to identify some money with his request that either would replace some of the costs that we're looking at here or contribute to it. I would think that taking it out of reserves at this point, when we're just getting into the 2015 budget, is probably not the right way to go about it. I think we ought to see what the 15 budget requests come in at, and what we can do there. We can meet with the sheriff and Buildings and Grounds and try to nail down these projects that he's got that need to be addressed. At least just a brief discussion that I had with him prior to coming to this meeting today. He's got one here that's called the jail kitchen remodel, but that doesn't address some of Buildings and Grounds' concern about the plumbing that's underneath that building. So I think we need to get a little bit more information to come back to the board and say, okay, we got 1.4 million. If the rest of the board agrees that the projects that I've told you about here is the way the rest of the board wants to go. But then we would have 1.4 million left, and we just need to figure out how we should best spend that money to take care of these problems. And then probably look at long range. What are we going to do? What are we going to do in the future for not only completing some of these other projects that we don't have the funds for right now out of this master plan budget that we put together, I don't know, 3 years ago. And you know, there's some options there of diverting some of our current levied funds in the future to the buildings accumulative building fund that could be used for new projects, can be used for upkeep and maintenance on our current buildings. Buildings and Grounds has informed me that, you know, we're adding all these buildings and we've got some old buildings and it costs, you know, you got to keep on top of the maintenance, replacing roofs and things like that cost large amounts of money that we probably need to have a cumulative building fund ongoing that continues to put money in there so that we can take care of these without having it be a spike in our budget every year. You know, we could increase the levy for the cumulative building is one way to add more money to the cumulative building fund. The other way is to divert some funds from other areas. So I think that's what we ought to do with these requests for taking money from our current reserves right now to put into a special reserve. I think we need to look at it in a bigger picture.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I agree with Commissioner Holloway, and we did have a discussion before the meeting that I'm fine with making it part of a broader discussion. When I put it on the agenda last week, it was to keep it on the radar and in front of you. Making it part of a broader discussion makes sense. And as Mike and I said before, that's not all the cost to fix these things. That was about half of what it's going to take to fix all three of those things. And we're just trying to capture some of the money out of that last year's budget that was over-collected revenue. So that was the intent originally. Now it's shifted to a broader discussion, and I think that makes sense and would support continuing that till that time.
Any other comments? I appreciate your comprehensive review of that, Commissioner Holloway.
Thank you.
And I think it helped us get our minds wrapped around this whole thing. So thank you, Sheriff. Next item is item B, the IT department.
Good morning, Russ Tinsvold, IT Director of Pennington County. The request I have before you this morning is to transfer $20,000 into the IT Equipment Reserve Fund. That $20,000 is from last year's budget. It was budgeted in our 2013 budget, and we budget that every year, $20,000 for that fund. That fund is intended to be used for large IT equipment projects, which typically happen every 3 to 5 years. We were fortunate last year that we did not have to use that $20,000 for anything else in our budget, so it was still there at the end of the year, and at this point, I'm just requesting that it be transferred into that fund. I'll stand by for questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Well, I guess I do. Why are we getting all these right before the budget cycle? What's going on? Everybody trying to jump the gun on the budget? Is that what we're trying to do? Yeah, there's no $20,000 isn't there.
Sure, in my case, and I can't speak for anyone else, the timing of this from the auditor's office, they just asked that it not be right at the first of the year because there's a lot of other things going on. Gives them a little bit of breathing room. And I don't mean to understate this, but this seems like a bit of a formality because we did budget for it. So it's a transfer that's scheduled to happen. As far as the timing, it doesn't matter to me if it's now or at the end of the year, if you have a preference.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Julie, don't we have, isn't that the $20,000 that's in the IT equipment reserve now? At that special fund, it's there.
This is to increase that.
Increase it to another 20,000 up and above what's already there?
There's about $13,000 in it right now is the current balance, just over 13. So this is to add another 20,000.
Yes. It's on the, depending upon where you're looking on that big report, it's a pending request.
Okay.
But it would be to increase that equipment reserve.
Well, this report I got, it says reserves in 2014.
Beginning balance?
Well,
Yeah, I would have taken that from the balance sheet. Have they spent any of it this year?
There's another 20,000 in the 2014 budget, but the 20,000 we're talking about right now is the non.
No, beginning balance of the IT equipment reserve.
I think it was $13,000. It did not include the 20,000 that is not spent. It's 13,670 or something like that.
I could have gotten an incorrect figure from her.
sure.
But
So-
this would be to continually add to his reserve.
Russ, and what you're trying to do is just build this fund up for those 5 to 6 year expenditures.
Correct.
Okay. Again, kind of like the same thing I told the sheriff. I think we need to wait and deal with that in the 2015 budget. I do think, that's one of the reserves that we want to keep. And so if we start budgeting $20,000 a year to put into that IT special reserve, it'll be there every year unless you pull money out. When you get ready to pull money out of that reserve, you'll have to come in and make a request for a supplement out of there, right, Julie? Mm-hmm. And so it should build itself up and it won't go away at the end of the year. So if you don't pull any out during the year, it'll continue to grow.
And I understand that. May I ask a question just so that I better understand this process?
Sure.
So as I understand it, the current balance is just over $13,000. This request was for money from the 2013 budget, and then we also have in our 2014 budget $20,000. For the 2015, we have $20,000. So I just want to make sure that I understand correctly that even though this is from last year's funds, it still is appropriate for it to be a part of the 2015 budget discussion?
I understand that it's last year's funds. Apparently, he's talking about last year's fund in his general operating budget that was left over. But it's kind of like the conversation I had when the sheriff was here. That money goes into the county's reserve fund at the end of the year. And if we take that $20,000 out, then we just don't have as much money to apply to 2015's budget.
And that makes perfect sense. Again, I'm still trying to understand what's the best way for me to budget for this into the futures. And in this case, it actually is a budget line item in our budget from 2013.
They have a budget line item for $20,000 to increase the equipment reserve fund every year.
And that'll go in there. It'll go into
Yes,
equipment
and-
reserves.
Yes, and at the end of 2014, we will come back with the request for 2014 to increase the reserve at that time, prior to the end of the year.
So we just missed it for 2013?
We missed it for 2013.
It doesn't automatically roll over.
No, the board has to put it in a special reserve. It's the only way we can budget for it. This is the same process we'll be using for budgeting to accumulate money for the bus. You
Okay,
actually budget it, and in the past, the reason we've done it after the first of the year is because they've spent money from it. He has not spent any money from that and is not going to spend any from the 2014. So this is the process. He's not going to spend it, which is what it's not intended for. 13 was just the first year that they didn't spend it in a current
okay.
budget year.
So when he puts it in his budget and whatever he doesn't spend at the end of the year, that doesn't automatically go into the reserve?
No. So the balance that's in there is money that he has set aside under this process. We've had this process with IT for a number of years. What has happened in the past is they spend from it. It's not supposed to be, we're going to spend from it this year, which he met that in 2013. He's not going to spend it out of 2014. If his budget runs over, he has to come and get the reserve money. Now, it is something that you could not do this and transfer some of the equipment reserve money into that IT, or just transfer that entire balance, which needs to be discussed during budgeting time. But he's done it right. And these type of budgeted, and when the bus gets budgeted for the first time this year to start that reserve, we will bring those in. We're not letting them spend money, and we're bringing them in prior, that last meeting of the year, to set those over into reserves.
So you can't set up a budget that just goes into a reserves. It has
No,
to go
the board
into a
has to
regular
make the
budget
motion.
and then roll it in.
So we levy it, and the problem is as IT has always spent from that budget.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. And we will come in November so they don't get in the hole, and we're not letting them spend them. It's the only way to levy to increase that.
So in 2013, this reserve budget that he had, he didn't spend the 20,000, he didn't
He did
spend
not
anything?
spend that. But that's why we advised him to come in 2014 and ask for what was left.
Okay, well, that makes more sense to me
Yes.
now.
He's done it right. And to protect that for assurances to the board, we will not let him spend that or the bus reserve once that gets started.
The motion that needs to happen then is to approve the addition of $20,000 to the general fund assigned IT equipment reserve?
Yes.
That's the motion?
Mm-hmm.
That is my motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I think the motion that should be made is to compliment him for not spending it.
But it is. I
He's
mean,
not
I could
supposed
sure
to
add that to the motion, Commissioner. But actually, that budget worked just the way that it was set up to work
This year.
this year.
In 2013, because that's the first thing when I saw he was going to do a supplement, and I said, don't be budgeting to increase a reserve and then spending it in the current year. That's not what it's for. If you're going to spend it in the current year, just budget for it and we won't increase your reserve. And he assured me he needs the reserve to build up those type of expenses
Okay.
for the
Anything
big
further?
things.
If not, thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Okay, item C, additional information requests from the Board of Commissioners. If you recall, when we were sitting as a Board of Equalization, at a point, we asked the commission to submit to Holly requests for information from the Department of Equalization so that that information could be present when we addressed the different appeals. And that seemed to be quite helpful. And so it was my thought that we might take this time to address the budgeting process in a similar manner. And we don't necessarily need to air our requests now, but if you agree with the process, prior to substantially getting into the budgeting, we recognize the opportunity to tell Holly what we want to hear from the departments or the auditor's office relative to budgeting, the budgeting process. Does that make sense? Okay. So we'll proceed in that manner, and hopefully that will be helpful in the process.
Mr. Chair? Could somebody, and I don't know if some of the rest of you know, what is our schedule on that, on the 2015 budget?
Budgets are due this Friday from the department heads themselves. Auditor Pearson will go and compile them and put them together. Your provisional presentation will be on June 6th.
Okay.
We go into hearings on like the 18th, 19th, and 20th of June for individual departments.
June 6th is that first?
Is Friday.
Is that Friday
our
meeting?
First meeting in June, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we'll go to item 18, buildings and grounds. And the first is item A, construction project update. Mike?
Good morning. Mike Cool, Buildings and Grounds, Construction Project Manager. I have some updated information I'd like to give to the commissioners. First of all, I'd like to provide the commission with an update on our current projects here on the complex. The sheet that I've provided you has a rundown of where the budgets and expenditures are currently for the project. I placed some red boxes around some areas where, just to call your attention to them. An example would be under site work. Our current budget for that, the site work on Block 99 is just over $2 million, and we've spent about $1.3 million to date, or we're about 66% complete on that project. Another one that would be of interest would be the administration building, which has a $16.5 million budget, and our expenditures to date are $11.4 million, or we're about 69% complete on that one. Overall, down at the bottom of the sheet, with the green bars, the last row, you'll see the combined project totals. This would include the parking structure numbers as well. So we had our budget's worth $34.6 million, and we've spent to date about $27.7 million, and we're about 80% complete overall with our projects. The remaining information on that sheet is based on the information that the building committee was interested in seeing that was kind of developed from our last meeting last week. Because the parking structure is complete, there was a balance of $182,000 left over from that budget. Plus, there was some additional money left over in our property purchasing budget. I've pulled those out down here at the bottom and subtracted them for the balance of the budget that's left for our overall projects to get the adjusted outstanding commitments that we have. Continuing on down then, from the commission, or from the auditor's office, the $9.4 million is what we currently have left for bond money, unspent bond money. Less the commitments that I just mentioned, the $6.5 million, we have $2.8 million in bond monies left over. Continuing down is the estimated cost of the FF&E costs, furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the new administration building. That's something else that's on the agenda for today for discussion. That is $1.4 million. Subtracting that from the bond amount comes up with the $1.4 million that Commissioner Holloway mentioned a little bit ago. Then I've also identified the amount of funds available in accumulated building and provided a total down at the bottom. So there's nearly $3.5 million in accumulated building for a total of $4.9 million that's potentially available for addressing project needs.
Any questions or comments?
So Mike sakes, this is a lot clearer than, we struggled with what we were working with on the other day. So this is a lot easier to understand. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, very good report. We'll move on to item B.
All right. As I mentioned, I'm also here today to provide an update on the furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the new building. This is something that we've been working on for over the last year, trying to, from meeting with departments, assessing wants and needs, review meetings with the building committee, determining how items should be procured, meetings with vendors, review and revision proposals, and the preparation and review and advertising of bid documents. These are all things we've been working on to get pricing and determine what's needed for the things that we need to move into the new administration building. The Buildings Committee had a desire of, when we came to the commission requesting authorization of any of these components, that we brought all the numbers basically together. We of course don't have everything worked out yet, but the sheet that I've attached to the cover memo for this outlines the things that we are providing for the new building. They include furniture and storage units, phone system, IT equipment for the building, high-density filing and storage systems, audiovisual equipment, window coverings, and interior and exterior directional signage. All of that totals the $1.4 million that was noted in the breakdown that I provided to you as part of the update. Yeah.
Mike, of these ones that you just ran over, the total of 1.4 million, how many of those are hard figures that we've got? We've either got bids on or we've got proposals on.
You'll note up on the side we're actually seeking authorization on 4 of the items. The top 4 are hard numbers. The high-density filing storage system is also a hard number that just needs to be reviewed with the building committee. The audiovisual equipment number is, I actually just got an updated number from them yesterday. It's very close to what's been stated there.
And the two bottom ones, the $250,000 are estimates,
Are just estimates at this time.
probably strong estimates?
The window coverings one, depending on what we were to do in there, and the building committee desires to wait to see what the need is actually. That one is probably at $10,000 strong.
Okay.
The interior and exterior directional signage is probably stronger than that yet. That one really depends on how far we go with signage yet, so.
Okay, thank you.
Can I answer any questions in regard to the FF&E?
Any other questions?
Oh, Mr. Chair, maybe I would just have a comment. Sometimes you think, well, we can do it within our own organization. And so I've been involved in reviewing the furniture and looking at it. And one of the wiser things that the building committee did was hire an outside consultant to do that, because they met with every single department and looked at every single piece of furniture, and then looked at the building we're building and figured out how this desk will go into this office and these chairs will go here. It was mind-boggling, the amount of work that went into that. And so they earned their money, but we saved more than what we paid them by the amount of furniture we're going to be able to move over there. And I'm really, I want to recognize that, because that made a huge, huge difference. And we did not want to completely furnish that building when we had good furniture here already. So, of course, we have larger areas and we did have to put some furniture in there, but it was worth the money we spent to hire a consultant in this case. Saved us in the end.
Yes.
Any other comments? If not, we're ready to move to C and D.
Yep.
And you want to do C first?
Yes, please. As Commissioner Troutman pointed out, one of the goals of the building committee was to utilize as much quality furniture that exists currently in the new building. And that was an enormous task that I am very grateful that we hired ARC International to assist us with that. It has been a very difficult task, and we're still not done yet. But they have done an outstanding job of figuring out ways to accommodate the building committee's wishes and their ability to work with the committee to convey the information that they need has been great. With that, we last Tuesday, on the 29th, we had a bid opening for the furniture for the new building. The low bidder for that was Dakota Business Center, a local vendor, with a bid of $568,731.74. That number is in line with the numbers that we were estimating for cost to utilize existing furniture to the extent possible, the biggest extent possible, and then subsidizing with new. Arc International has reviewed the bids and is recommending the award of this contract to Dakota Business Center. I have provided you with their recommendation letter and the bid tab from the bids. I have asked Kelly from Arc International, who's been working with us on this project, to attend today to respond to any questions that you might have. But I'm seeking your authorization or award of this contract to Dakota Business Center. With that, with your award to that vendor, we will come back, prepare a contract and bring that back at a later meeting.
Okay, what's the wishes of the commission?
So, Mr. Chair, I would move to award the contract to Dakota Business Center to provide and install furnishings as described in the procurement documents identified as Pennington County Administration Building Bid Package, Furniture and Equipment for $568,731.74.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Next is item D, Administration Building IT Equipment.
As I referenced as we were talking about the list of the FF&E items going to the new building, several of those items are items that the IT department has worked with me and the building committee on determining the needs and getting pricing or contracts negotiated to meet those needs. The things that they're seeking today, they do have proposals for these items. They include the phone system for the new building, the IT equipment for the building, which is in two different proposals. I guess with that, I'll let Russ maybe provide you with some of the details of these proposals.
Good morning again, Russ Tinsvold, IT Director. So the memo that I put together, hopefully kind of put this in layman's terms, because I know the quotes that these vendors provide sometimes are a little cryptic. The first thing I want to assure you of is we've tried to utilize existing equipment where we can. A lot of that isn't really represented in this proposal because this doesn't say what we're not replacing. It just says what we need in the new building. So there are a lot of pieces of equipment that'll be carried from this building to the new building, but there's also an awful lot of equipment that has to stay in this building because we have network infrastructure that stays in this building and it can't be carried over to the new building. In addition, we have equipment that is at end of life in this building, and we purposefully stretched out the life a little bit longer because we knew the new building was coming, so the timing was good to do that. With that, the other part of it is making sure we get the best prices. All of this stuff is expensive, but I just want you to know that we did try very hard to make sure that we got only what we needed, and we went to multiple vendors to make sure that we got good pricing. All of the vendors that we talked with use state contracts or the joint services agreement contracts to make sure that we get the lowest price. But the reality is we're in Rapid City, South Dakota, so that's a factor. So some of these vendors are selected based on the fact that they are local vendors that can provide quick support if we have a critical IT need. So all of these things were factors in this. And part of that resulted in having multiple bids because that was the way we got the best price. So I apologize now for it not just being one agreement for all things IT. So just running down the list, the phone system, we have the core back-end part of the phone system that was purchased a few years ago from several departments went together in this building and purchased that. That can be moved to the new building, and then we build upon that and add new handsets to make a good, current, modern technology phone system. That's the $103,233,000 from Golden West. I guess I want to ask you, would you rather that we just talk about that and then decide whether or not to approve that and then move on to the next one? Or would you rather I went down through all of them?
What's your wish?
Let's do one at a time.
Okay, any objection? Okay, Russ, you have your direction, so
Okay, thank you. So that would be the request for the first one, for the phone system for the new building. The total bid on that from Golden West Technologies is $103,233.84. So what we're seeking is the approval of the signing of an agreement with Golden West for the new phone system in that amount. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve the signing of an agreement with Golden West Technologies for a new phone system in the amount of $103,233.84.
Second.
we have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it isn't much of a discrepancy there, but I think you said 84 cents.
Oh, did I?
And I think that Russ did too, but it shows 74 here, so it's only 10 cents difference, but it's got to be right in the minutes.
Okay, so
It's
then,
84 in their quote.
Okay,
So what should it be?
I actually think the right amount is 84 cents.
everyone is right.
okay.
Any other discussion? If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you. The next item is data storage, network switches, servers, and equipment racks. So this is really the core networking. The building included all of the cables running from individual offices back to equipment rooms. And those equipment rooms include network switches where all those cables plug into a switch, and then there's cabling that goes back to the main server room to connect to the main equipment. So it includes all of those network switches, and then it also includes all the data storage. Going back to an earlier agenda item, our IT equipment fund that we expect to spend out of every 4 to 5, 6 years. This is the area that we expect that money to be used. Things like data storage, about every 5 years, the technology changes, and maybe you can do things twice as fast or half as much, or it takes up half the physical space, those kinds of things. Similar to personal computers, they get smaller and less expensive, and you can store more data on them. So this covers that part of it also, the data storage, and that's the part that I just want you to know that we have a funding source now in place that every plus or minus 5 years, it will replace part of this equipment. So that is also through Golden West Technologies in the amount of $286,000 and some dollars. And so at this point, we're seeking the approval of an agreement with Golden West for the amount shown on your memo, and I'll answer any specific questions that you have.
Any questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the signing of an agreement with Golden West Technologies for a data storage system, network switches, servers, and equipment racks in the amount of $286,598.16.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And the third item and final item that I have is with a company called CDW or CDWG. That's a regular vendor that we work with. That item includes one big component, which is an additional backup hardware device. It's the same make and model that we already have. Going into the new building, we're going to expand that to make sure that we can properly back up all of our data. So that's $11,373 of that. The rest of it is cables, supplies, some specific switches to the servers. It's kind of a miscellaneous catch-all, by going through this other vendor, we saved a fair amount of money, and there's no advantage to using a local vendor for this. So that's why this was pulled out separately. So at this point, we're looking for approval to sign an agreement with CDW in the amount shown, which is $17,866.31.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you mentioned supplies, and what are we talking about for supplies? What is that?
Things like rolls of I think it's like 500 feet of Velcro, because with all of the hundreds, it's hundreds and hundreds of cables. So when you have the switches in the communications closets, so the building brings all the cables into one of, I think there's 5 equipment rooms, and then you need little, what they call patch cables. They're like your network cables on your computers. They're 3 to 5 feet long, but we need hundreds and hundreds of them, because you technically need one for every outlet that's anywhere in the building. So those add up, and then you need things like hundreds of feet of Velcro tie wraps to bundle those together so that we have a good, clean, organized system.
So is this company installing all that stuff, or?
No, the IT staff will install that. They just provide, this is just raw supplies.
I just hate to use building or cumulative building funds for supplies.
I understand.
I mean, I can see buying the backup equipment and frankly the cabling that needs to go in, because that's one-time cost. But it is.
Well, and let's see, I think I do have that breakdown. Let me look at that and just see if we pulled out things like the Velcro, which I think is a relatively small amount. Again, the largest item is the backup device. And I think you have a copy of this purchase order or this quote from CDW. The first 1, 2, 3, 4 lines are all cabling. The last one is a switch. So really, $974, the last item, that really is what you think of as supplies. That's Velcro. And if you're more comfortable pulling that out, that's fine. The other items are broken out because they're different lengths of cable, I think.
Julie,
Well, I'm
do you
sorry,
have
they're different colors. So we have green, yellow, and red and black cable because they're used for different devices, and that's the way the rest of the building is laid out. That's why that's broken out. So that's the cabling, and then we've got the switch, then we've got, I'm sorry, the backup device, then we've got the hardware switch, and then the last item is the Velcro. So I'm sorry that it wasn't a little bit more clear, because I don't want to suggest that we're spending $17,000 for Velcro. But if it's easier for you to pull that last item, that wouldn't be a problem for us. We can certainly absorb that in our budget.
Julie?
Of course, you'll always take a offer up like that if he can absorb it. I just want to make it clear to the commissioners that when you're building a new building, anything that it takes to put that building into work can be legally charged to the bonds and to accumulated building. If you wanted to buy if you thought we needed fly swatters in the new building, you could buy fly swatters for the new building to get it ready for move-in. You can't buy fly swatters from either one of those funds for an existing building because it's already in place. So those can be charged, but if he volunteers it, take it.
Okay, thank you. Anything further?
Okay.
What's your wish?
So, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve the signing agreement with CDW for backup hardware device server switch cables in the amount of $17,866.30 minus, I'm sorry, 31 cents, minus $974.01 for supplies.
Do you have a second?
I would second it, but I do have a comment. Their purchase order that they sent you has got 2 figures. It's got $17,866.31, and it's got $17,541.64.
Yeah.
Do you know which one they're expecting?
I don't know, and I don't know why they're different.
If anybody's got a calculator, we probably should run that and just see which
Well,
one.
Just a comment. The actual number of cables that we order might vary just slightly because we only want to order what we need. And I don't know how that gets dealt with. If you set a hard number, which I'm fine with, I'm going to make the assumption that if it goes beyond that, then we just cover it in other parts of our budget. And so with that in mind, you could take the lesser of these two numbers, or if you have a calculator handy, I think Mike's adding it up right now. We can just add up those first items and make sure we get the right amount.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I really don't know why we would be pulling $974.01 out of the building program that comes out of bonds and put it into a general fund budget that you're using for your annual budget that you have. It looks to me like it is a building program expense. So if we pull it out, you'd be spending it out of your regular budget that you didn't really have a budgeted item for. And then it would leave more money in the bonding to spend elsewhere. So it looked to me like what we're doing is taking money out of the general fund that would roll back into the general fund budget at the end of the year and spending it for this Velcro cables or cable fasteners. Looks to me like it's all part of a building program.
I'll tell you what, Ken, we have just operated this way. If we can keep it, I mean, we have wanted to guard what we do with that bonding money so carefully. We have just gotten used to it. I don't know. And actually, department heads have been great about that. If
Well, I said to Ron a minute ago that I thought it was part of the building deal, and Julie confirmed that, and that, you know, it's a one-time deal. If she's gonna go out and buy $900 worth of Velcro to fasten wires together in this building, I'd say, wait a minute, that needs to come out of your last year's budget. But
So a quick clarification, it's the top number, the 17,866, that includes everything on that list, right?
On the list.
Just another comment in case it helps in your decision. The Velcro that we use for bundling these cables together is probably going to be there for the life of those cables. It's not something that is going to be there for 3 or 5 years. It's going to be there for a very long time, if that helps in your decision of which way you want to go. Either way is fine with me.
Okay, so let's say the figure, again, is it the 17,866?
Well,
That's correct.
the total is 17,866 and 31 cents. And then I guess you need to decide whether or not you want to subtract 974.01 from that.
Okay, so we've got the correct figure, and Karen has that. And now the question of,
I would,
If I may interject.
yes, you may.
I believe what you need to do is approve the entire purchase order. It's just where the 974.01 is going to get paid from. So it's a funding source, but I think we still need to show that that he has authority to purchase that from CDWG. It's just if you want the funding to come from other than the bonds.
Okay, so with that advice, we either need a withdrawal of the original motion or a substitute motion or something.
So, Mr. Chair, I would, can I just amend the motion? Or would you rather do a substitute motion?
I think we could have a friendly amendment, don't you think, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I would just amend the motion to authorize the expenditure in a total of $17,866.31 as per the purchase order.
Is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to amend and a second. All in favor of the motion to amend, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we have an amended motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It appears to me, Mr. Chairman, to be the classic case of let's spend the $100 and then we argue for 15 minutes about the nickel.
Like I said, we've been doing that.
So,
Is any additional discussion required in regard to the funding sources overall? What I had shown basically in my breakdown for the project was that number coming out of the bond money. I don't know if that should require any additional discussion or not.
Any comments? I think you've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is item 19, emergency management.
It's spread out here. Morning, Chairman Peterson, members of the commission. Dustin Willett, Pennington County Emergency Manager. Here we are 7 months later, still dealing with a snowstorm from last October. It's been a huge learning curve and pretty humbling in the fact that impact to infrastructure and obviously any lack of significant loss of life except for the livestock. In the grand scheme of things, it was a relatively small disaster, and yet here we are 7 months later still trying to tie up the loose ends. So what I'm here before you today to talk about or answer any questions on is the reimbursement money that we've received both from the federal government and the matching funds from the state. All the money that we expected, all the money that I expect to get back out of this process, we've gotten back. And I believe Commissioner Davis requested basically that money be set aside when it came back in so that its final disposition could be talked about. That's what this agenda item basically is for today.
Mr. Chair, I believe the reason I brought that up back then, and Commissioner Holloway said that we shouldn't be taking money from the federal government if we had it in our budget to pay for the line items. So that was my suggestion, to hold the money aside and just see what the outcome was when it was all over with.
Gotcha.
So that's, discussion here today is great. I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but
Copy that.
that's what we did.
So where we are right now, we had three project worksheets basically that I brought before the commission, and we talked about the pros and cons and the merits, and some things we didn't apply for, some things we did. Of the things that we did apply for, it then went to various FEMA review committees, both at the regional and national level, and was further pared down into what was actually allowable versus what they trimmed out of those grant requests. So at the end of the day, the total amount we received, both from the state and the federal government, was $240,305.35. Keep in mind, we spent right around $550,000 as a county on Atlas response. So a little less than half of what the county actually spent, we received in reimbursement from the federal government and from the state government. Out of that $240,305.35, because we set up a cost code very, very early on to track these costs, what ended up happening was basically only two departments expended funds. Everybody was charging outside of, with the exception of County Highway, the money that was being spent on Atlas was being charged to a code within emergency management. Now later we pulled some of the regular payroll out of that and put it back in the departments where it needed to be when everything was all said and done. But what it comes down to is with a motion that was made earlier to balance out 2013, when we were trying to close out 2013 at the end, a motion was made basically to take all of those Atlas costs that were captured in that cost code and that was paid for with emergency management restricted fund dollars. So emergency management and highway are where all these dollars basically came from. Those were the funds that these dollars were spent out of. So the request today, and I went through and based on the applications that we put in and what FEMA approved for what specific items, the breakout of that $240,000 is $139,701.71 is what was reimbursed for highway projects or expenditures, and then $100,603.63 were emergency management costs that came out of our budget. So the request today and the discussion is the request is to put that $240,305.35 back into the accounts that it was spent out of, back into the budgets that it was spent out of at the end of 2013. So that's what's before you. Hopefully that's clear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that I possibly can.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. Julie?
You know, we're just having a terrible time today with cents, but you'd need to add a penny to one of those to actually equal the holding account money of $240,305.35. Part of the reason we wanted to set this aside is the board at the time had requested if they could deposit that money received into any fund. And we did check with our higher up lords of the numbers, and you can deposit that money in any fund that you desire as a board.
Do you have a recommendation?
No, I don't have a recommendation. I'm just delivering that one of the questions that came. Emergency disaster fund, where the money wasn't spent from, you could replenish that. You can put it into the general fund. You can give it back from whence it came. But that was a very specific question that we could not answer at the time.
Thank you. What's the wish of the commission?
Well, Mr. Chair, since we're talking about emergency management and possibility of disaster, floods, whatever, this will go over like a lead balloon, but we need some money in the drainage program to take care of the drainage off of our irrigation ditches that we've been talking about. So here's a classic way to get part of it.
I can say that without even this part of the reimbursement, if this doesn't, if the 100 and it's a little less than that, but if that money doesn't, as I stand right now in my current budget for this year, 2014, I won't be able, I'll be $34,000 short this year. That money was spent out of my reserves, and it depleted my reserves. I've got nothing there. I can't even support this year's budget without recouping some of those costs. I don't budget to, emergency management doesn't budget to fund disasters, and that's what happened with Atlas. So that money you can certainly put that money anywhere you want to, as Julie mentioned, and then you can certainly deny it, and I can just have to roll with the punches, but I would be back with supplement requests to keep me afloat in emergency management.
Dustin, how much did you say total the county got back?
$240,305.35.
And is that when you've given us 3 sheets of paper here, and it says total reimbursement received, $137,729.28.
That's for the application PN 101. The next one is for the PN 102. It was in 3 separate grant applications.
I don't know, when I add those 3 up, I don't come up with the same number that you've got.
Does it have something to do with any adjustments from from FEMA or?
Let me open a calculator here and see if I can.
See if you can help me out.
I think it's right. I think we had 11,000. These are claimed and allowable, but these are really what we got back. Isn't that?
You need to, make sure that we're adding the total reimbursement received.
241. No, that could be 587.
That could be, I don't know.
For some reason, I can't find my calculator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it come up with?
That's yours?
Yeah.
And that is, the only thing I can think about is the total reimbursement expected on the last page on PN 106 was $11,653. What we actually got was $10,933.
Oh, it doesn't have it.
Okay, I didn't have that figure.
Yeah, so that's.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We didn't have that
It just
figure.
kind of dropped.
Neither.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I'll
Yeah.
throw out my thoughts on it. I don't have any qualms with giving emergency management back to 100,000, but I guess county highway, I would probably go along with your proposal, putting that in a drainage fund to later on. used for our putting the channel into concrete?
Heidi?
Heine Junge, Highway Superintendent. I guess I never thought of that concept, but I think it's a good one, and I would support it. We did spend money out of Highway to help the Hawthorne ditch clean that up, and that was a drainage issue, and I think it was a good idea, and I'd support it.
What, Heine, did you overspend your budget for 2013?
No, because we had, as I stated earlier, Plateau Lane and Reservoir Road, we reconstructed those two roads and the bids came way under what our estimate was. So I think probably close to $1 million was unspent in my 2013 budget. But I think this is a good place for it. It would start a drainage fund and we can start looking at getting that Hawthorne ditch covered up.
Thank you.
Dustin, I noticed here on the claims that there was claims from Buildings and Grounds. I guess they didn't get anything approved, but the Sheriff's Office and Search and Rescue.
Mhm.
But those expenses from those two departments actually came out of your budget?
Correct.
Okay.
Out of my reserves.
And you said you ended that year with a deficit?
No, because they were all spent out of the reserves. What it did was
pulled your reserves down.
Yeah, it means that I am not funded for this year's budget, and my reserves are gone.
Well, I could support the emergency management's budget, but frankly, the highway department had money left over at the end of the year, so I don't know why we would supplement that back into the highway department's budget.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would say to that, it's really not a highway budgeting situation. It's a situation that's come up that would be better off to have these ditches in a concrete tube running through our areas and hopefully hold all of the water that's draining off of private property and off of the highways into the irrigation ditches. I don't think it's something that Heine's budgeted for, really. We've taken the money away from highway over the last few years, at least 4 or 5, and put it into the general fund from our drainage fund that comes out of building permits. And so this would just be reimbursing for those building permits that have been lost over the last few years. So.
Well, and frankly, he gets money from the general fund every year to support his budget. And you know, we have, I mean, at least we've said that we're going to set up a special reserve to give to Heine those drainage funds for the future years, but I guess I just don't see using it for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
All it was an idea to get the discussion started, so somebody's got a better one, bring it up.
Well, my better idea is to leave it in general fund.
Now, what would be better about that? That just gives every department more money to spend and we'd be still out the drainage.
No, what it does, Commissioner Davis, is it helps us as we're moving into the 2015 budget. We continue to take this money and put out to these special funds, and I agree that some of them need to be there. But if we just do it for everybody that comes forward, then we have less money to support ourselves in future years of budgeting. So we either, if we want to do this, then when we get to the 2015 budget, we're going to have to take $139,000 out of somebody's budget, and I guess we could do that out of the highway department's budget.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
But at one time, we voted, didn't we, to just set up a drainage budget for these kind of things?
Sure.
And how much did you expect to put in that every year?
Well, what we were going to do is take that money that comes from that drainage fees, and Heine was going to put it into a special fund in his office to keep track of.
Okay.
But, you know, to say that we've been collecting that fee and haven't done anything with it
I didn't say
through the
that.
years, Heine works every year on doing some drainage work. He works every year on doing drainage work, and he gets money out of the general fund every year.
But then in turn, we go around and we sell each one of these individual people that building houses and building garages and building commercial buildings a building permit and charge them X number of dollars for drainage on that building permit, and then take the money from that and go put it in the general fund and spend it for however we want.
No, we're not.
And yes,
We're giving
that's
it to-
exactly what we're doing, Mr.
We're
Holloway.
giving it to the county.
That's exactly what we're doing.
We're giving about $3 million to the.
Doesn't make a bit of difference how much money that's in there from the general fund.
General fund. Comes out of the county general fund.
Sure it does.
Where do you think that money comes from?
But is it, Mr. Chair, is it right, Commissioner Holloway, to charge somebody something on a building permit that we're not using it for what we say we're using it for?
We are using it for it.
No, we're not. We're putting it in the general fund and
It's
spending
all
money from someplace
greenbacks.
else.
It's all greenbacks. It's all dollar bills.
Okay, let's see if we can gather our thoughts enough to make a motion that might pass. Do we want to divide the issue into?
I could also throw out there that the total amount taken out of emergency management's reserves that depleted it was 203,000. But
That's the total dollars that was taken out for the storm? 203,000.
203,000 from the emergency management line item, yes, from emergency management's restricted funds.
Oh, then you're not talking about the emergency fund that you say is depleted.
No, it was taken out of emergency management's reserve funds, restricted fund balance. Not that, the emergency disaster fund is a completely separate, completely different a fund that the board has access to. That's not underneath my office.
So that's the money that you're asking to be put in to bring that reserve back up, is that emergency disaster one?
No, emergency management is where it was spent out of. You spent it out of emergency management's office, out of my reserves.
Okay, for a total amount of how much?
203,000.
And that would cover all expenditures out of emergency management.
Correct.
I don't have any problem with that. But what's left over, I think it'd be a good idea to start it on the other project.
Just another option to consider.
Okay, are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll see where it goes. I would suggest that we take the funds that we received from FEMA for the Storm Atlas and replenish the emergency management funds that money was taken out of to pay for the Storm Atlas, and the balance of it go into drainage at the highway to start a reserve fund to put the drainage ditches and the irrigation ditches into a concrete culverts.
There's a second to that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And if I understood what's been said correctly, someone needs to do a little math in order to identify the.
$37,305.35 if we use 203,000 even.
Okay. Are you okay, Karen? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Everyone understand the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, excuse me.
I understand the motion. I guess I'm going to vote for it to start that drainage fund. But I may vote in the future not to provide any money for it in the 2015 budget, because we have already, I mean, whether we take it now or we take it later, I guess doesn't make any difference to me, but I'm not sure I want to take it now and later both. So that would be my reasoning for voting for it at this time, if that made any sense at all.
Any other comments? If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. Next item is item 20, abatement application.
Morning, Commissioners. Shannon Rittberger, Director of Equalization. You have an abatement request before you that comes from my office. It is an abatement due to an owner-occupied classification error. This is another one that we discovered the property owner brought to us. It's a mistake on the part of our office dealing with new tax software. Found that the owner-occupied classification was not dropped, but not applied to this property.
Any questions by the commission?
I'd like to start a little excitement on this one, and since Loris is here, God rest her soul, she'd have something to say about this too, I'm sure. But we seem to be making a lot of errors on these things, and this is costing the county a lot of tax dollars. And the county people, these are all reverting back to the county, all of the county taxpayers to pay the bills for the schools that are getting their share, and we aren't getting ours. So that does bother me a little bit.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Shannon, with the problems with the software, is it possible to run a report of some kind? I mean, to compare the information that was put into the software to see if we ourselves could pick up the mistakes?
When we found the first few, we did that.
Okay.
But what caused this isn't fully understood, so we didn't pick all of them up, obviously. We thought we did, but then we haven't.
Okay.
And it goes to not understanding exactly what happened here.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the abatement.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is the Highway Department.
Good morning again, Heine Junge, Pennington County Highway Superintendent. First item I have is modifications to the forest agreement. And basically, 2 weeks ago, you approved the master agreement, which is a 5-year agreement. By approving that, it allows us to do all these sub-agreements, which the Forest Service likes to call Modification 1 and Modification 2. So we have 2 of them today. Modification 1 is for aggregate crushing. We're crushing gravel into Copper Mountain Quarry for Pennington County. The Forest Service would like to have a pile, and it's easier for them to enter into an agreement with the county that will pay the contractor for the additional aggregate that the Forest Service wants, and then the Forest Service will reimburse Pennington County, and they want to crush a total of $34,000 for, that's modification number 1. Modification number 2 is according to our livestock agreement. The Forest Service works with the county to purchase the materials for new livestock guard installation and also for repairs on some of them. Modification number 2 replaces one livestock guard in Gillette Prairie, 2 of them, and 1 on Twin Springs. So this allows the county to go ahead and do the work, and then we get reimbursed from the Forest Service. So we've reviewed both these modifications, and it meets our approval, and we are asking a motion to approve both modification number 1 and number 2 to the cooperative road agreement. And there's about a 20-digit number that I won't read with the Black Hills National Forest and authorized chairperson's signature.
Based upon the recommendation of the highway superintendent, I'll make a motion to approve modification number 1 and 2 to the cooperative road agreement with the Black Hills National Forest.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Next item is authorization to bid for bridge repairs. Based on our 2013 bridge inspections, there was 2 bridges that needed deck units replaced. and one bridge that needs diaphragms installed. And we've looked at both of these. We're developing plans now to go to bid, and the first action I need is a motion to authorize the highway department to advertise for bids to repair these three structures.
That'd be my motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Karen, do you have all the details? Okay. If there's no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Do you have an introduction you want to make or not?
Oh, I guess I could. I was the one that did this agenda, and Tom started May 1st. We felt it'd be better for me to do it this way, but come on up here, Tom.
We might have some kind of an initiation ceremony later.
Oh, okay. Okay.
For initiation, the flogging post is right out back at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
This is Tom Wilsey. He's going to be your new highway superintendent. He replaces me. Officially, I can still sign documents until June 30th unless you take that authority away from me. And he will be taking over July 1st. We've had a discussion in office about how should we allow him to start signing documents or not, and how do we want to do it. So we've decided that we're going to let him do it, sign as the interim superintendent. I don't know, I suppose sometime in June, you'll have to go through your official motion and get him his little certificate that he's actually been appointed for a 2-year term. But Tom Wilsey, the new highway superintendent, and we've been working together the last few days. Things are going good, and hopefully he's going to try and get out and start driving the roads. And when he does, he'll let you know his schedule, and if you'd like to ride with him in your particular district or area, he'd be more than happy to put you in the old dusty Suburban. We're going to let him drive, and he can tour the roads. So this is Tom.
Welcome. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Tom, welcome to Pennington County, and thanks for coming and accepting the position. You're going to have big shoes to fill.
I'm learning how big the shoes are.
We don't say that very often because we're afraid you'd ask for a raise. But Heine's done a fantastic job over the years.
He's got a good crew, and I've noticed that in the last 2 days.
Thanks for being here.
And next meeting, Tom will do the agenda, and I'll sit in the background and listen. So we'll get him started off on the right foot, and hopefully you won't be taking any more money out of the highway and wanting to put $2 million into the new building that we got for roads. So we'll see where that goes. Thank you.
Looks like the stage is set. Okay, thank you, Heine. Next item is items from Weed and Pest. Scott?
Good morning, Scott Guffey, Pennington County Weed and Pest Director. I got some maps. Give you two. I just wanted to give you a brief update on mountain pine beetle activities we've been doing the past fall and winter with the $670,000 we got from the state grant. We did have a couple of setbacks. Winter Storm Atlas shut us down for about a week there, and then the government shut down, slowed us down a little bit too. We were able to begin with, mark trees during the shutdown, and then they said no more marking trees with paint, but we could still GPS them. So we were able to at least stay on the forest while that shutdown was going on. But we ran around 12 seasonal tree markers. We had some drop out, and we're able to gather some more in to keep that crew around 12. And they did a great job. And then we contracted with 48 local independent cutters. Kind of had too many cutters to begin with. We kind of narrowed it down to about 30 cutters there towards the end. But we were able to get a little over 22,000 acres surveyed, and on that 22,000 acres, we found about 30,000 trees total, including the dead trees. Total trees cut to date is 19,697 trees, green, beetle-infested trees, and then 3,000, almost 3,500 dead trees that came off right-of-ways. That also includes salvage, 500 trees off the mini storm timber sale area that'll be sold this, I think this fall. That's the mini storm. It's a 14,000 acre timber sale area that runs from Three Forks all the way over to the Stratable. So it's a good sized timber sale area. If you look at your map, it's kind of that maroon colored area. You can see a lot of pine beetle activity on that west end, south of Sheridan Lake. And then as you work towards the west, it kind of tailed off. So those dots represent anywhere from a single tree up to a group of maybe 1,000 trees. So it's groupings of trees. So we're still we're working on our right-of-ways right now. We're going to salvage a little over 3,000 trees there, both green and dead. The green trees are going to Nyman Timber Plant out of Hill City, and then the dead trees are going to Deadwood Biofuels down here in Rapid. Also on those dead trees, there's a lot of down trees from Winter Storm Atlas and some trees that the Highway Department have dropped over the years. If they're not totally punky, Deadwood Biofuels can use them, so while we're there, they're going to grab those trees as well. Forest Service is allowing that, so that was good to hear. For next year, we'll have around, if we can salvage those trees on the right of way, and then also there's about 2,000 trees on the far western part of the county along Bulls Canyon that we didn't get to. We had some cutters not do the work, and then by the time I sent another crew up there, the snow was 4 feet deep and those trees are about 25 inches wide. And talked to Nyman's and they're looking for trees, so we're going to try to salvage it if the snow melts and we can get the roads open, and if it's not too soft, and get an agreement with the Forest Service. So there's about 2,000 we're hoping to salvage yet before July 1. So that should carry about 2,000 going into this fall of the state dollars. So we can do work continuing into the fall with that money. I did request for our final installment of $268,000. That should be coming fairly soon. I think out of that 268, they'll hold 15% till we're completely done with the project, and we should have all those funds expended by the end of the year. The new funding that the legislature passed this year, that was $1.9 million. They kind of married up two bills that were introduced, and the $350,000 right up top's going to Custer State Park for their pine beetle mitigation. So I'll leave about 1.6 for the counties and the state. We're kind of deciding how that money is going to expend it. It probably won't go directly to the state or to the counties where we get a set fund. We're going to try to identify the most area in need in the Black Hills on the South Dakota side. And then depending how it works out, the state might administer all those dollars and do wall-to-wall treatments both on private and Forest Service. Kind of depends on if it gets to be too much of bureaucratic red tape with the state and the Forest Service trying to do these agreements, they might run them back through the counties. So we'll see how that works. We're having a kind of a agreement meeting on the May 29th on where those dollars will go and what areas will be hit with that. The other thing I included was our Buck Mountain evaluation. That was the area that we cut last year in the pre-timber sale area. And we identified 3,600 trees and we cut and chunked 3,200. We were hoping to do some salvage sales in there, but at the time, Forest Service wasn't really set up to do those salvage sales. We are doing those this year because we could have salvaged a lot of those, but instead we cut and chunked them. So we want to go back and see how we did, to see what we're doing is worthwhile, if we're having some positive impacts. And from our research, we show about a 38% decrease in pine beetle activity in that area, to where if we hadn't done anything, you could have probably seen a 5 to 10 fold increase in there. So it was good to see it justified for me that what we're doing is good, and hopefully justified to you guys that what we're doing is worthwhile. Happy to report, if you go up in that area now, that Bogus Gym area, you'll find some big logging decks. Nyman's is in there salvaging those trees, so we're gonna get that area thinned out over the next couple of years, and that'll provide a nice buffer there for that Johnson siding, Nemo area, lower Nemo area, Doty Fire Department, Bogus Gym area, and Norris Peak, so. That's kind of a brief update. You got any questions on Pine Beetle?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to thank Scott. He has been quite innovative in working through all of these issues. And certainly it was his idea to develop a way to salvage trees rather than to just drop them and cut them. And that salvaging comes back in money to the county so that he can do more work on the project. And I just think that's a really smart way to do it. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that you think outside the box and you're always looking at, well, why can't I do this? And the great thing is you have such a good reputation with the Forest Service, and they're willing to listen to what your ideas are and see if they can work through them because of who you are. So thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. And money back on that salvage is to cut and chunk, we're paying $15 a tree. To salvage, we're doing $10 a tree. And when they salvage, the logger gets money back at the mill for what they're bringing in. So it is money savings, and also it gets rid of that fuel loading issue that we're having with the cut and chunk when we leave it on the ground. So.
Okay, any other questions? I think we all agree with Commissioner Troutman.
Thank you.
You want to do item B?
Yes. So this kind of rolls us into where we're at now. The entomologists, at their surveys they did this fall, they're kind of seeing starting a tipping point maybe that this pine beetle epidemic might hopefully be on its downhill slide. Now, I've heard people say 5 years ago this would be on the downhill slide, but even looking at the aerial surveys this year of the dead reds, the rate of increase has definitely decreased. So hopefully we're out of this epidemic fairly soon, but the aftermath we'll have is a huge fuel loading issue on the Forest Service. And working with Forest Service on these agreements, what we tried to do this fall was there's a representative from Nyman Timber that wanted to do some more debarking experiments with one of their machines. And we met down at the SO's office, a small group of us, and one of the timber sale manager for the whole Forest Service brought up these stewardship agreements that he's seen done on some other Forest Service districts. And at the time, and still today, there's never been one done in the whole Region 2 of the Forest Service system, which is Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and South Dakota. There's never been a forest or a stewardship agreement done. So there's a little bit of a learning curve here. And the Forest Service was willing to look into it, Black Hills, and try to get one started up here in the Black Hills. And I volunteered Pennington County to work with them and the Mystic District to try to get one of these on the ground. And what a stewardship agreement does is allows the Forest Service to contribute either funds or goods to the project. So it's kind of a win-win, and we can do more basically on less, and hopefully it pulls some of the impacts out of their timber sale crews out of there too. So we've kind of had some initial discussions. Last Monday, some members of the Pine Beetle Advisory Committee, which is weed and pest, emergency management, fire coordinator, and highway department, and then Nancy representing the commissioners was there too. We also had DOT representatives there as well, and Bisnick District representatives. And Mystic has developed a white paper. And basically what we're looking to do as we step into this next phase of the pine beetle is to be proactive on the fuel loading and the potential for wildfire. It's not if, it's when. Sooner or later, we're going to have a probably a catastrophic wildfire breakout in the Black Hills. And if we can get some fuel breaks established along the right-of-ways, that'll secure both the evacuation routes and then basically a line of defense on that fire to bring it down and hopefully contain it. So what I'm just bringing to you today is, before we get too far along in this process, is want to get your thoughts and ideas and hopefully your support that we continue with this. Just like any Forest Service agreement, you start out with your 5-year master, just like Heine was mentioning. You have your 5-year master where you just basically have the outline of the project, the sideboards of the project, and then as you work closer into your actual work on the ground, you set up these supplemental participating agreements. And so what we're proposing now is to work towards a 5-year master, bring it back in front of you guys, and hopefully get your signature on it. But before we get too far, and Forest Service invests a lot of times in developing these stewardships, I just wanted your vote of confidence, I guess, as we move forward on this.
So, Mr. Chair, I think, Heine, you have some, there's some background for you for the highways too.
Yeah, I've been working for quite a few years with the Forest Service to allow us to remove trees in the right of way, and especially the 10-foot clear zone. And typically, when the tree is standing, it's federal government property, and when the wind blows it over or falls over, then it's a county highway responsibility, and we have to remove it. Well, this program is real innovative, and it appears very interesting because they're talking about going in and making, cutting trees within the right-of-way, not only for fire breaks in case we have a bad fire, that they have a place to stop the fire, plus we can evacuate people if we have to. And the other plus I see with it is that if we get the trees removed within the right-of-way, it opens up the roads to sunshine. And we have a lot of roads out there with trees growing so tall that it's shaded all day long, and in the wintertime it remains icy and slick, and we have to continually go out and sand it. And if we can open that corridor up so the sunshine gets at it and it can melt that snow off of there, it's gonna, safety-wise, and help us with our snow removal operations. Plus, every year, I put a crew together in the fall, and we cut trees and trim trees all winter, trying to remove trees in the right-of-way. And under this program, it would allow us to get that right-of-way opened up and hopefully lessen that maintenance cost every year. So as I looked at it and reviewed it, it would be a big plus to the county to get this stewardship agreement in place, so then we can start working on the details and what roads we should have for fire breaks and safety corridors. So I would support it.
Thank you, Heine.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Holloway?
Scott, how far off the highway did they put this buffer in?
It'd be 100 foot from center line from each side, so a 300-foot fuel break.
And for cutting or thinning these trees out, then, with this stewardship agreement, would they allow a contract to be issued, and maybe the cost of removing them trees wouldn't be it would be not an expense?
Right, yeah. As we get these bigger trees, these mature trees that have value to them, that's what they're talking now. And is one way they could contribute is donate the timber to us.
Okay.
And then we could go out for bid for it, and then hopefully, break even or make some money on that. They can go back into the project. So yeah.
So the Forest Service doesn't actually put any dollars into this?
They have the capability. If they have some funding somewhere that they find, they can actually put funding into the project as well. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I can remember this coming up years and years ago, and it's, we haven't gotten anything done with it, and this looks to me like it's something that's really a workable situation. I think it'd be a win-win for us and for the Forest Service, everybody that's involved. And especially the fire break situation, and to get the trees back away from the road so we don't have trees falling across the highway. And it's just another deal that we can cooperate with each other and get things done.
Scott, are you seeking a motion or some kind of a declaration of support, or?
I don't think I need anything today. Just, we'll proceed, we'll put together a master agreement and then bring it back in front of you guys and get a motion and put it together.
Heine?
I don't know, I guess, to me, I'd rather see a motion in the minutes that they, allow you to proceed with it, just so there's something documented that it's been in front of the board and you're supposed to proceed. So I guess I think something in the minutes would probably help support us in the future in case there's an argument after the election, after the elections take place. So I don't know, I guess that's my input, Lindell. I wouldn't mind seeing a motion to authorize him to proceed.
Sure wouldn't hurt, I guess.
Mr. Chair, I would make that motion.
Okay, we have that. Commissioner Davis made that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. And Karen, you can word it any way you want.
Well,
No, actually, the motion is to support the concept and allow Scott to proceed.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, I don't know whether we should go into executive session for this or not.
Hardly.
Item 23 is the nomination of Heine Junge to the South Dakota Transportation Hall of Fame. And I think the application or the nomination has been prepared, and there will be no debate from the Highway Department. So we'll restrict the commentary to the commission itself. What's your wish?
Mr. Chair, there is one item I want to make very clear, and I'll read it, and it's putting red ink on the front of this thing. So it says, for full disclosure, Heine Junge currently serves on the South Dakota Transportation Hall of Fame Honor Committee. However, the Pennington County Board of Commissioners feels he is worthy of this honor and wish to nominate him and have done so without his knowledge. And so he's on that board, so everybody understands this is not a deal that we're trying to shiest anybody with anything. But if there's a deserving individual out there to be on the Hall of Fame of Transportation in South Dakota, I think it's Heine Junge.
Okay, do we need a motion to authorize this?
I was waiting for you to say something to break up my dissertation there, and yes, I'll make the motion to nominate Heine Junge to the South Dakota Transportation Hall of Fame.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments? Do we need a roll call vote?
Other than one left.
Okay, if not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, item 24 is a request for approval of an additional approach. And where do we start?
Becky's my wife, so she couldn't be here, so I'm here.
You proceed, identify yourself.
My name's Jared Groven, and basically we're just asking for another approach. Our property is just long and narrow, and rather than have to put 300 feet of driveway back the wrong direction, we just would prefer to have another approach. And we're inside of Keystone city limits, but since they don't have zoning, we have to come here.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
On this little map, where are you proposing the new
Down
approach?
Towards that end, yeah.
Down towards
You
this
can
end?
kinda, on that picture, you can kinda
Dan.
see,
Right in there.
yeah, about in there.
Where you been driving in anyway?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
where they've been bringing the materials for the shop.
Okay.
Yeah, where people for Ingersoll been parking over there lately.
Just to clarify, the reason he's here is because under ordinance 14 and the authority you've given the highway department, we only allow one approach per parcel. And we felt that the highway department did not have the authority to grant a second approach because our ordinance does not allow us to do so. So when we get to these unusual circumstances, we let them come in front of the commissioners. Because there's two approaches on the property already, and this is the third one, and so that's why it's here. We originally denied it because we didn't have the authority to approve it.
Do you support the concept?
Yes and no. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to get a business there now, and they don't want to use one of their existing accesses. And we've looked at the site distance, and I think Mark. It will meet site distance, right?
I believe it will meet site distance. The existing two approaches on the property are permitted. They were permitted when that property was divided into 5 or 6 parcels at the time. Since the new owners took over the property, they have combined the parcels back into one. And now they're asking for that third approach.
And
I believe it will meet site distance and other criteria, yes, other than ordinance 14.
Sure. And if the property would have been left into 5 or 6 different parcels, they could have had a approach at each one of those parcels.
Yes.
I would make the motion to authorize the additional approach to this property.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. Now you can tell your wife you did a good job. Okay, now we have item 25, which is a request for a waiver of administrative fees. Step forward and identify yourself, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rick Hewling. Back in 1996, I replaced a single-wide trailer with a double-wide. Just recently, I applied for a building permit to build a shop, and I was made aware that I hadn't satisfied the requirements back then when I put that in there due to my own ignorance. I was getting a building permit for the property. I'm here this morning to ask the commission to accept my apologies for that and possibly waive any and all penalty fees associated with that due to my ignorance and stupidity. When I did find out about that, I did pay all the fees up front with the planning and zoning department. I have been working with them back and forth on this issue, trying to get it cleared up.
Dan, are you preparing something for us to see here or not?
Well, he needs a variance for 2 things, actually for 3 things. The double wide that he moved onto the property, never got a building permit. That's part of his request, is to waive the double fee for that building permit for that double wide that was moved on back in '96. He's also needing a variance. He needs a variance for 3 things. He needs a variance for the existing double wide that was moved on. It is too close. It's closer than 25 feet to the north property line, which is the right of way. He's also requesting a variance for a proposed shop building he wants to put on the property. He's also requesting to be 20 feet from the north property line. And then lastly, he needs a variance for the ACUS, Air Installation Compatibility Use Zone of the Ellsworth Air Force Base. It is located, this property is within the 65 to 70 noise contour level zone, and our ordinance requires that they get a variance if they want to put a double wide within that noise level zone. So we have done a number of those in the past. And they are required to, and it is a variance that is going to be in front of you shortly. He does, and if you approve the variance, he would have to sign a waiver basically stating he's aware of the effects of being in that area, and he's signing a statement which will be filed and recorded with Register of Deeds.
All of those variance requests are coming in under item B?
Yes.
So with this, with this topic, we're only discussing waiving the penalties on the current, or on the the late payment on the building permit?
The late payment on the building permit and the double fee and the penalty fees for the variance request.
For the trailer house?
Correct.
Or
Well, the variance fees for the trailer house that was moved on prior to getting any building permits or getting the variance request.
I guess it's it's a manufactured home, isn't it?
This is the double wide that was replaced back in '96. That is the Hepner Drive, which is to the north on the right, and he's too close to. He's required to be a 25-foot setback. The double wide is actually 20 feet from that property line, which he thus needs a variance request. The shop building he wants to locate to the right of this, it would have the same setback as this double wide that's on the property.
The garage that we see there in that picture, it's all right?
Yes.
You got a building permit for that?
I believe he does. It is in compliance, or it was put there prior to 95 or 94. It is a legal structure.
It was built in 1980, about 1982, I believe.
So if, so we understand this completely, can you identify the amount of regular fees that he's paying and then what he's expected to pay in addition as penalties if we?
Yeah, if you waive all the fees, the penalty fees, it'd be $1,055.
And what would the fees, rest of the fees be?
Well, the normal variance fee is $370, and the building permit would have been $255. So he's paying double that building permit fee, which is $255 as a penalty. And $800 is also a penalty for the variance request, which he needed prior to putting that structure on the property.
But you said we're looking at 3 variances?
Well, the variances were all done under one request. One variance for all 3 requests.
But had he come in before...
And we normally do that.
Had he come in before, he would have had to have a variance for his house, right?
Correct.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can you tell me, I think I read in here that you weren't told that you needed the building permit by the person that you bought the double wide from, is that correct? Did I get that right?
That's right.
And that was a dealer
It
that
was
you bought it
Alaska,
from?
It was Alaska Mobile Homes, and the transport carrier was Dependable Transport at the time.
Okay. Maybe we should remind those folks. And I'm not too sure they shouldn't be the one that's paying for the penalties.
I know both of those businesses are no longer in business.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess I would say that I'm not inclined to waive the fees, or waive the penalties, I should say. We put those penalties in place for a reason, and either we apply them equally across, or we should just get rid of the penalties altogether. And I think we apply them to other people, and I see no reason why they should not be applied in this case.
Got a motion?
That would be my motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. I vote no. Motion carried. Okay, next item is item 26. Commissioner Davis?
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, as I have been going around my area, visiting with my constituents, I run into a lot of people that are a little unhappy with our septic tank situation that we have going. And specifically, I keep hearing one septic tank pumper's name time after time, that they believe that people are being overcharged. They're being told that there's things wrong with their property that's not wrong. I believe people are a little baffled, no pun intended, to really what they should do and what they should be doing. And so I think we need to clarify what the people need to do when they're hiring a pumper, who those pumpers may be, and whether we can make a recommendation or not, or put something out there that says, hey, this particular pumper is costing a lot of people a lot of money. And I don't know how we do that and stay within the legal realms of our responsibilities. But there's a lot of things going on out there that shouldn't be going on, and it's time it stops. And we've got enough problems with our septic tank ordinance as it is, without overcharging people and charging for things that don't need to be done, and things that there isn't anything wrong with their property. And that's where I'm coming from. I've heard stories after stories out there that this is happening, and maybe it's time it just comes to an end.
Okay, any other comments?
So, Mr. Chair, as a clarification, we did receive the pamphlets and so on that are given to the people who are, first of all, getting an inspection or who are putting in a new septic system. And I still go back to after I read it, to the fact that if it's my septic system, I'm responsible for hiring that person. And if I choose someone that I am not happy with, it is not the county's problem, because I personally hired that person or that company. And so even though I know folks are frustrated, I would want to say that they do have a responsibility, just like the gentleman that we just dealt with had a responsibility to know. These folks do too, and the county is providing them information and saying, this is your choice to do this, and to hire this company. And I just do not see how we can go into a homeowner's life and say, you hire this person. I don't like that, and I couldn't support that.
Mr. Chair, I totally agree. I don't think that the county should be saying, you hire this person, but I think we can put enough information out there to say, don't hire that one.
I don't think so.
I don't know whether we can do that or not, but the problem is that we're responsible. No, we're responsible for these people to have to do this item. We're not. Well, absolutely, because we passed the ordinance that says you will have these pumped and inspected. Mm-hmm. So we have a pumper out there that's not doing his job right as I see it and what a lot of other people see it, that's costing a lot of money. And that's the only reason I bring it forward. And I don't think the county has a responsibility to say, you need to hire that one or anything else. But I think it needs to come out that the people do have a choice and that this is not a situation where they just have to hire somebody and take their word for it. That's what's going on.
Some of the
Yeah,
information.
but if you got a problem, you can come back to the county, say, hey, is this really a problem? Is this something that you guys can help with, or is this something that, that I can do different? So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Commissioner Davis, is the company that you're referring to on this list?
Yes.
And obviously Pennington County's putting this list together, right? Are you guys getting any complaints about one of the people on this list of overcharging people or not doing a good job?
Good morning, Brittany Molitor, Water Protection Coordinator. I don't talk directly to the citizens. Kelsey does most of the communication with them. When we do get concerns from citizens, a lot of times it's an educational thing, and that's why with those materials that are in the packets, we try to customize them based upon some of the feedback that we're getting, whether they be complaints or concerns, or to try to understand. And, when this went into effect, it's just kind of progressed over time and getting feedback from people. So that's kind of where we're at. And, some of the information that's in there is maybe some education stuff or some concerns that people had during the process.
Well, I would think if we're preparing this card and we do find out that we've got somebody not doing their job right, we could surely take their name off the card and not hand that card out that imply to people that we think these are good people. I mean, there's probably other people that's pumping that we don't have on this list.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I would agree. We had a similar situation at the Register of Deeds office a few years back when we were giving out, here's the people who will marry you. And then we had the Wiccans and everybody else saying, why aren't I on the list? And you know what the answer is? Don't give out the list. Let them figure it out. That's what the yellow pages are for. It's not what our job is. Forget the list. Throw it away.
Chairman Peterson, the list is based upon, our ordinance does require the pumpers to be certified. So those are the ones that are certified through our process and our ordinance. That's why they're on the list. So that's where that list comes from. It's not a...
A little better, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But still, I would say, if we got somebody who's not doing a good job, take them off the list.
Go ahead.
Josh Frankie, A1 Septic owner. Just to give you guys kind of a heads up, we do get complaints about a certain company also. By taking getting rid of this list is kind of taken away from the education of who is actually certified. I mean, we spend a lot of money every year to do the classes, keep updated. We take the test. We're certified with the state. We know the ins and outs of this stuff. We did before this ordinance. We inspected these tanks before the ordinance. It was kind of our job, to keep these people educated on these systems. If there's somebody doing a bad job, cut them off the list. I mean, it's what else are you gonna do? I mean, I got stories that we could go on all day. I know you guys are obviously very busy people, but the biggest problem is people holding the inspection forms hostage, making these homeowners think that they have to use that particular company to fix the problems just because they pump the tank. Now, if these people are going to not send in these forms until the problem's fixed, these people, obviously there's no education on any of these cards or any of these forms that are going to make them think different. I mean, we've gone as far as helping 92-year-old women rehabilitate drain fields and fix baffles for free because they can't afford it. And we were just in a position where we could do that. So, I mean, I don't see punishing the rest of the honest companies for, whether it's a newcomer. I like I said, I've had a lot of people call and it was too little too late. They'd already been charged way too much. Their forms have been held hostage. It's just not right. I mean, it's a joke compared to the way this deal began.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I can't see why if we got a bad company, I don't know why we have to put them on the list. You know, and there's a lot of towing companies in town. And over at the dispatch center, when we were, and I think they still do it, if there's a tow company that starts stiffing the customer and we get the complaints back, they talk to that tow company, and if they don't comply, they take them off the list. Law enforcement won't call them. And I don't know why, if we got somebody that's a problem, we should talk to that company and say, here's what the complaints we're getting, and if you continue, we're going to take you off the list. Because when we hand out this little packet, and I think the packet's good, it gives a lot of good information, but we put this list of companies in there, the public is assuming these are all good, qualified companies. And if there's one of them that's stiffing them, I sure wouldn't want to promote it.
What they're assuming, and what they should assume, is they're all certified by the state or by us. That's what we're telling them. We're not telling them they're good, we're not telling them they're bad. That's not our decision to make. We're telling them they're certified.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Brittany, do we have in the ordinance, and I don't remember this, a certain time frame where when a pumper goes out, pumps, inspects, and needs to have the form in? Or is it just like they can do it 6 months down the road?
We do in our ordinance, we require 60 days, then they get second notices, then they get final notices, and then they get sent to the state's attorney's office. So
However, that's not what I'm asking.
Oh.
I'm asking about the pumper.
we don't know. Not any specific time that says the pumper needs to turn in the form in a certain date. We don't know.
Okay.
If I may just briefly, Jay Alderman with the State's Attorney's Office.
Didn't have a conflict of interest.
I agree partly with what Commissioner Holloway is saying, in that it doesn't hurt for the county if they've received information that is credible. There has to be some proof of it. I wouldn't want to advise somebody to just get after somebody on rumors. I'd like to have that actually a little bit of proof that goes with that, or have the actual folks who think they've been wronged, they make the call. And secondly, if the state is a part of the certification process, of course, I don't know what that, as I stand here, I don't know what is entailed in that. But the state could also be informed that one of the entities that have been certified have these allegations against them. Again, I would hope with some solid proof and not just a rumor or an emotional appeal that I think I was wrong. So I agree with informing, because that's what we do in society. We're on TV, we're talking about it. There's a certification entity, let them know, but I think the people that feel that they've been wrong, they ought to be the ones doing it, or at least providing the information that would support an allegation that they have been wronged in some way, and get that to the right people. But I wouldn't advise having planning and zoning just make a phone call this afternoon going, ABC company is bad, without some good, solid proof and information to even remotely go down that road.
My only thought is that if we want people to accept this ordinance, and it's our ordinance, and we're requiring them to do this, if we don't try to address the problems that come up in the administration of this ordinance, then we're going to have the people up in arms about it. Everybody's going to get up in arms about it because, we put the ordinance in, and then we let people get taken advantage because of the ordinance. So I just think that staff needs to try to verify these complaints, and if you get it verified and you got people that'll stand up and look the guy in the eye, and even if you have to do it in your office, and if the person won't change their behavior, do maybe go to the state or whatever. But I sure don't think that we would have an obligation to keep their name on the list in our documents that we're handing out.
In terms of this issue, the the intent of a septic ordinance should include the disposition of what's pumped out of the tank. And my superficial view of this is that there might not be as much monitoring and surveillance of that as we might think. So just because someone's certified doesn't mean they're scrupulous. And I would suggest that based on Commissioner Davis's input here, as well as the discussion, that it be placed on one of your let's watch it lists and see if there's some need for further regulation or adjustment to it. Anything further on that?
That's the only reason I brought it up, Mr. Chair, is for informative information, to let people know that they have a choice and they can come back to planning and zoning or to this board and say, hey, I've been wronged, or something needs to be done. So they just don't have to sit and take it and think that if they do complain, somebody's going to do something to reprisals against them.
Okay, we're up to item 27, if we can have a motion.
Mr. Chair, could I make a motion to take a 10-minute break before we start?
You may make that motion, it may not pass.
Second.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second?
I'll second it.
And we need a motion.
I don't know.
Motion to go into Board of Adjustment.
Second.
Motion and a second to convene as a Board of Adjustment. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. You're on, Dan.
Good morning, Dan Jennison, Pennington County Planning Director. Item A is a variance request 1407, Verizon Wireless, John Rowe as the agent, Joe Theberge as the owner. This is to reduce the minimum required setback from 1.1 times the height of the communications tower, 190 feet, in the general ag district. Staff is recommending to continue this variance request to the May 20th County Board of Commissioners meeting per the applicant's request.
So how many times are we going to have to continue it?
Yes. It's also, the telecommunications permit is also being continued. He's looking at different options of possibly lowering the height. If he doesn't do that or get approval of that, then possibly even a different location.
So is it long enough time period? Because, like, especially those telecommunication permits, I mean, is the reason it's coming back and being continued because we aren't giving them enough time?
Well, part of it is being continued because the Planning Commission is still looking at the telecommunications permit and looking at different options too. So we want to hear the two items together on the same request and make them work together.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I have moved to continue to the, I'm sorry,
May 20th.
May 20th.
There's a second?
I'll second it, but I don't like it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are you going to vote against it then? You don't like it?
We'll see.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Reluctantly, aye.
Motion carried. Item B.
Item B is a variance request 1409 for Richard Healing to reduce the minimum required front yard setback along the north property line from 25 feet to 20 feet to bring in existing residents into compliance. This is what we discussed just earlier regarding the variance request and also the ACUS. I don't know what additional information you would need other than he's looking for a variance to allow for the home to remain in this noise level zone with a condition that he sign a statement and to allow for the existing house to be 20 feet from the property line and a proposed shop building to be 20 feet also from that same property line.
Wouldn't be bad.
Mr. Chair?
At least put it on the record.
Yes.
What, is there any reason why the shop can't be set back?
He's indicated this is a preferred location as it somewhat, if he pushes it back, will block his view of the hills from his property or from the house. It is his preferred location to push it as far north as possible, because directly to the west is a view of the Black Hills. Is that correct?
That's correct, and also to keep up with the aesthetics of the property, to make sure my buildings are all in line along that road, just to make the property look more in order. You can see right there, it'd be lined up with the north end of the trailer there. And this road that goes back in behind my place, I've lived here since before time, but it's actually an unmaintained road of the county that actually turns into a two-track. It's basically a road to nowhere. I can't see that it put any burden on the county to have that shop where I'm proposing to put it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Dan, what about the overlay of the crash zone and the base on this? Is this out of that completely?
Correct. This is only in the noise level zone, and it's the lowest noise level zone that we regulate.
Okay, so there's no problem with continuing building another shop in this area and having an encroachment on the base?
No, this is not even close to any crash zones
Okay.
From the airstrip. It is only in the lowest noise level zone.
Okay.
You can see this is
I got you.
right here, this is the next and so forth, but the crash zone is actually right next to Ellsworth Air Force Base in the landing strip.
All right.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And I'm trying to remember how this goes, but in years past, we have been pretty restrictive on allowing this kind of building and so on because of some of the Ellsworth Authority issues that have been created and so on. I mean, that organization was created to minimize building in certain areas. And I don't remember exactly what those parameters are, but have we looked at any of that? Because it doesn't make sense for us to allow a building if this is in that area where they're trying to clean up.
Right, and their main areas of concern are the crash zones that they're really concerned with, and those are the areas they're trying to clean up that are right next to the base. They are not as concerned about the lowest noise level zone as they are those crash zones.
And you've consulted with them about this?
I have not. I have to look into to see whether my staff member has, but we have approved of these variance requests numerous times before, and Ellsworth Air Force Base was
How far
always.
back in time?
The last one, has it been at least 5 or 6 years ago?
Well, and the reason I'm questioning this is that in the past, I have been part of meetings and so on with Ellsworth and with the authority and with the state and with the county and with Box Elder, all in a room, talking about their concerns because of BRAC.
Right.
And so that was really part of Ellsworth Authority's formation. And I just want to make sure that we as a county are going to go ahead and make a problem when we've agreed in the past that we're not going to.
We did route this to Ellsworth Air Force Base
I'm not talking Ellsworth Air Force Base.
and the city of Box Elder.
Ellsworth Authority.
Yeah.
Ellsworth Authority?
They're the ones that are supposed to be dealing with this.
They're supposed to be the watchdog for building and
Yes.
stuff in
And
the encroachment areas.
We as an entity have agreed that we'll handle it. And in the past, I've made you do that, so I'm going to stick with that.
What I remember with the Ellsworth Authority is that they are very concerned about those crash zones, and mainly those crash zones. And what I remember about the noise level zones is our noise level zone doesn't even match what's currently happening at Ellsworth Air Force Base. The new flights that are going on there are a little less noisy than ours, but we wanted
But
to
we
keep.
don't know that for sure.
Right.
You know this absolutely for sure, or you just think this?
No, I know this. I remember seeing the plans, and I remember the discussion that was going on in regards to that. And part of that is that they felt we didn't want to change ours in case they ever had different planes come in that were more noisy than the current flights that are going on at Ellsworth Air Force Base. And so we decided not to change our noise contours based upon what the current flight operations that are happening at Ellsworth Air Force Base.
Yes, they're loaded.
I still want a verification, because in the
I
past.
can certainly get a hold of that.
Yeah, I really have.
The variance request actually has 3 requests to it. One is for the existing house, one is for the proposed shop, and one is also for, to allow this house to remain in this noise level zone.
And I'm not saying that you make him move. I'm just
Well,
saying that
I'm aware of
ours
that.
was the new structure. That was our part of it. And I'm looking through because I am not seeing where actually Ellsworth was contacted. It just says that the designation of these noise zones was intended to protect the health of the residents. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. The very bottom, okay.
Yes.
And again, I hope you're sending to the right person, because remember how we've had trouble with Ellsworth in the past? And I just don't want to jeopardize. I've worked on that before. I don't want to jeopardize that sort of thing.
Especially with the conversation now that's going on in a certain party in the Washington that's trying to stir up another BRAC. Again, the information just came out here in the last week or so.
If you give me that verification, I'm fine with this, but I
Okay.
just need that verification. I'm sorry, Rick, but I mean, it is a serious issue.
Yeah, and with all due respect, I believe the concerns with Ellsworth, from what I've lived out there all my life. I've lived, I actually lived on the base for 15 years, but I think the concerns there were the areas adjacent on the north end and south end of the runways. And there's large housing areas in those areas.
There is, but the noise levels and so on. I went to some Department of Defense schooling on this. And the noise levels and those kinds of areas that are designated are an issue and will be considered in a BRAC. And Ellsworth Authority knows that, because those guys were with me at that DOD.
Mr. Chair. Yes. I would make a motion to postpone this until the next county commission meeting to verify the fact of with the Ellsworth Authority and also the base itself, if there's any problems in this area, and then we've got it covered from here on out.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I would just like to add one more thing. I mean, this has been postponed once already, and now I'm postponing again. It's kind of creating a hardship for me as far as scheduling, contracting and stuff to get the project done. But I completely understand where you're coming from, and I'm willing to do any steps necessary to make it all right so we don't make any mistakes.
Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carried.
Item C is a variance request 1410 for Jeff Miller. This is to reduce the minimum required rear yard setback from 25 feet to 6 feet to construct a 30 by 30 foot pole barn in a low density residential district. If county board approves it, we'd recommend that one condition be attached. It's located at 23826 Highway 385, right at the intersection at Three Forks of Highway 385 and Highway 16. It involves 6.02 acres. Applicant just recently got approval for a log cabin on the property that was built in accordance with our ordinance and meets the required setbacks. He's now requesting a variance to reduce that setback to allow for the addition of not an addition, but a pole barn type of garage located at the very south end of the property. And he had to do some pretty major excavation to build the barn, or not to build it, but to want to build it in this location. I do believe he has other areas on the property. It is of somewhat steep topography and some hilly areas on the property. This is going in on the entrance. This is Highway 385 right here. Three Forks is right behind. This is the front of the property. Highway 385 is right in here. This is the new log cabin on the property. This is standing on the porch looking directly towards Three Forks. Highway 16 is right here. Highway 385 is to the left. This is looking at it is National Forest Service property that is adjacent, which he is asking to build next to. This is the area where he wants to build a garage. Right up here is the National Forest Service property line, and that's the property line he would be encroaching upon. But you can see there was some excavation done in order to build in this location. I was standing on that property looking towards the house, looking almost directly north, and just adjacent to the property looking kind of northwest.
So the deck, is that a deck or is that?
This right here is kind of a patio, and there's another patio back here, but the property line kind of runs this way. So this area is a lot more open, but it's just the one corner that he would be encroaching on into the setback. And that's right here is that same location, standing from the house looking towards the National Forest Service property line, which runs about right in here in that direction. And this is the corner that would be 6 feet from that property line.
Dan, what does the National Forest Service require for setbacks from their property line?
They don't have any requirements. It's our ordinance that requires a 25-foot setback in a low-density residential, and as long as they're not on National Forest Service property, they don't have issues with it.
Well, number 2, don't they say adhere to the setback requirements along the posted boundary between National Forest Service land and private property?
Well, which is our 25-foot setback, but they don't have anything in their ordinance or laws or regulations that state they have to have any setback.
But they're wanting us to adhere, wanting this
Yes.
person to adhere to that setback.
Based upon their comments, yes.
Commissioner Davis?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, and apparently, National Forest Service owns the property adjoining, and there's not gonna be any building back there, as far as the Forest Service goes, that I understand. So the only encroachment would be just on the property line itself, no
They're
other
not
buildings or,
encroaching onto National Forest Service
Correct.
land.
So-
They're just going to be 6
Close.
feet from that property line, which is the National Forest Service line. But they're still, the whole structure is on private property.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to approve the request of the variance for this item.
Variance number 1410.
Yes.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Further discussion?
So I didn't get the opportunity. It doesn't really address the motion. But I am concerned about erosion control and so on. I mean, that's going to be considerably expensive situation, isn't it? For erosion control on there?
Well, they do have to address it with the building permit
Yeah.
and have to, and that's something we do regulate, yes.
Do you wish to speak? Identify yourself, please.
I'm Jeff Miller, the owner. And it is
We're going to have the building set back from the hill itself, so we'll have drainage around the building, and should be all taken care of. One of the other reasons why I want to place it there, most of the front area of the home, I didn't want to block the front area of the home with a building. And my septic system takes up a large area of that bottom area. The rest of my property is all up, it's very steep land. This ties it in right in next to my garage, very accessible, right close to my electric. The original plan would have been about 170 feet away. This is like 80 feet away to bring the electric. It cheapens it up that way. Just a good place to put it. We might not even be at that 6-foot mark. We're trying to even pull it away even farther, maybe get it at 10 feet.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we have a motion and a second. You want a roll call vote? What was your question? Did
No,
you?
I was just saying, we've got the motion and that, okay.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is item D.
Item D is a variance request 1411 for Unique Signs, Inc., Founding Fathers LLC as the owner. This is to reduce the minimum required side yard setback from 10 feet to 3 feet to allow for an on-premise sign in a highway service zoning district. If the board approves the setback, we would recommend that 2 conditions be attached. It's located at 9815 South Highway 16, approximately a half mile south of Reptile Gardens, and it involves 9.14 acres. The applicant is asking to locate a sign in the very south corner of the property. The reason he's asking for it is because the drain field is in this location, and he cannot meet that setback without encroaching into the drain field. So he's just requesting to put an on-premise sign in this far south corner. The property to the south is currently vacant of any. It is owned by a gravel company or owns large acreages in the area. And right in here is where the sign would be. The laser pointer's dying. He's asked for 2 on-premise signs. The other one meets the required setbacks. They do have 2 approaches. The other sign is at the other driveway. This is the south end of the property. And
who owns the property just to the
south?
South.
That is I can't think of the name of it, but as one owner that owns something like over 1,000 acres in that area. They currently have and did a quarry up the hill. It's the same parcel. It is a large tract of land that is undeveloped at this time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
What's the other property zoned as?
General Ag. Actually, right next to it is Highway Service. You can see this Highway Service right here. I believe back in 1970, they did come in and just rezone a large, like 300 some feet on either side of Highway 16 to Highway Service, and it ends right in this area. But the property with Independence Hall is Highway Service. Right adjacent to it is Highway Service also, but it is part of a large tract of land that has dual zoning. Some of it is general ag, the majority of it is general ag, but right next to it is Highway Service. The main reason, again, is he does not want to put the sign within the drain field, which is right next to this area. They're very limited as to where they could put the drain field. So this is the area they came within 10 feet, which they're allowed to do with on-site wastewater. And so in order to avoid putting the sign in that area, they have to encroach into that setback to that property line.
You probably wouldn't let them put the sign in the drain field, would you?
No, we wouldn't.
Okay, so they don't have another option,
Or don't have a sign, that's the
or
other.
don't have a sign.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd make a motion to approve variance VA 1411 as per the applicant's request.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm going to vote for this, and it's not that big a deal. It's just, every one of these variances amounts to the same thing. There was absolutely no thinking, no planning, no nothing. It is much easier to come in here and have us give them permission than it is to plan ahead, but it's not that big a deal, I guess.
Any other comments? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item E.
There's a variance request also, 1412 for John Bolin. This is to reduce the minimum required lot size from 40 acres to 3.384 acres in a general ag zoning district. If the County Board of Adjustment approves the variance request, staff would recommend one condition be attached. This is located at 12291 South Highway 16, near the intersection of the Keystone Y. What this applicant is doing, he had applied for a building permit to put a studio on the property. The studio was, at that time, we did not have our guest house ordinance, and so it was allowed to be built. He could have the option of making it a guest house, however, it exceeds the size of that, and currently, there was a stove put in it just recently with the understanding from the applicant that he could because he thought he would be grandfathered. However, he was not. So he is aware that he is currently in violation. However, platting it into a separate lot will clear the violation. And that is his request. And to do this, there is no other zoning in the area that would support a lesser zoning district. However, there are other smaller lots. The area is and does have a lot of mining claims that are less than 40-acre minimum lot size. This will clear the violation of this being another residence on the property. He had been before you through a layout plat. He has also been before you in regards to a subdivision regulation variance. In order to plat this, he had to waive a number of road improvements, section line highway improvements, other percolation tests results, which he already has a drain field. All those were approved by previous commission meetings. And so this will just allow him to continue on with the platting process to clear the violation that is currently on the property.
So when he was in getting the rest of these variances, why wasn't this addressed at that time?
I'm sorry?
Well,
Oh, the subdivision regulation variance is a whole nother process that's in regards to platting. This is in regards to a lot size. In order for him to proceed with the plat, he needed those subdivision regulation variances, and that's just in regards to subdivision of the property. This is a variance to the lot size, which is in our regular zoning ordinance. It has to meet a certain lot size in order to be platted or to be created. So he needs this variance in order to proceed with his platting of this property.
and you said the other thing that he could do is he could just rezone this.
That is the other option, to rezone it to low-density residential district, which is what he would need in order to have this plat. However, you can see in the zoning map, the nearest LDR zoning district is located almost a mile away from the property.
How many properties in that area have we already give variances to on lot size because they didn't want to go and get it zoned properly.
Well, not exactly. In this area, these are all old mining claims that were created prior to the adoption of our zoning ordinance. They already exist and were in existence prior to that. As far as right in this immediate area, I'm not aware of any lot size variances that were approved to allow for a lesser lot size.
But those old mining claims don't meet the 40 acres.
No, but they're grandfathered in, and they could get building permits for those as we speak. Because they were created prior to the adoption of our zoning ordinance.
Looking at the map, or the plat map, I guess you'd call it, says layout plat, lot 1 of Bolin subdivision, formerly a portion of GL 11. So is lot 1 the only thing in the Bolin subdivision?
Correct. He's creating a whole new subdivision that exists of just one lot. He's leaving the rest as an unplatted balance, which he can do.
Mm-hmm. So he owns the rest of that as well?
Correct. There is an additional house on that property you can see right here. This house already is on the property. There's also a shed on this property, and that is the only other structures other than the one house, which is located right here. And that's where he's trying to create the separate lot just for that one house.
So the wording on this plat map, total 45.5 acres, more or less. What bearing does that have on this?
Well, he's taking this lot out of that balance, out of that 45 acres. This is currently part of all of this, which he currently owns. He's taking this lot 1 out of that 45 acres.
And the 45 acres is zoned as what?
General ag.
Hey, what's your wish?
Who owns the land then on the other side of that little stair step going up there?
This right in here, or this is all owned by the same property owner. This, and this is all owned by the same property owner as also this. So this is all one.
What about to the east?
To the east?
Yeah, right in there.
There's other different mining claims in there that are private property. I believe it's Forest Service here and here, but these are all separate mining claims that are privately owned.
Individually?
Some of them are owned and you know, they may own 2 or 3 of these mining claims. Others are one mining claim. But even if one individual owns 2 or 3 private or mining claims, he can build a house on each and every one of those mining claims.
And the reason that he wants this lot 1 is to put another cabin there or another?
It already exists.
It already exists. Or for tax purposes, does he have ag status on that land?
Good question. Yeah, it probably does.
Is the owner present?
Yes.
What's your tax status on that? Is that
I'm ag.
ag?
It's problematic because I'm a tree farm.
So then by creating lot 1, that lot 1 will no longer keep that ag designation?
It will not be ag.
No.
But the rest will remain ag because it'll be like 42 acres.
Okay.
And that's why you made it just a small little triangle, so you could keep your 40 acres for ag?
Well, the topology of the land is all steep and everything else. To make it 10 acres, I'd have to go around that other little house and so forth. I mean, it's just practical to do this. This all came about when my daughter, who lives in the house to the north, got a reappraisal for, and it got what am I trying to say, a reappraisal. The guy came up, and I can't think of his name now, that it was legal but non-conforming. So I started looking into that, and you have an ordinance that says a non-conforming structure, if it's more than 50% destroyed, I can't rebuild it. So I'm just trying to come into compliance with the current ordinance.
Okay, anything else?
I make a motion to approve the variance.
Do we have a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much, and I want to say one thing, that Dan and his staff have helped me and been very nice.
Thanks.
Thank you.
They're good staff. And I got some cards for you.
Okay, item F.
Yes. Item F is a variance request 1413 for Alan and Judith Binfit to reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 25 feet to 6 feet and 1 inch for the existing house, and to also reduce the front yard setback from 25 feet to 8 feet for a proposed addition on the house. If county board approves it, we'd recommend one condition be attached. And part of the correction, they do not need a variance for the existing house, only for the proposed addition. This is a very unique situation where the property used to be an interior lot. When they came in and the DOT came in and built Concourse Drive, it made the lot a corner lot, and thus his setbacks changed from 8 feet to the one property line to 25 feet. This is the current property that is requesting a variance request. This is Concourse Drive, which was built, I believe, back in '05. This is Twilight Drive. There used to be a residential house right there, you can see right here. And when the DOT came in and bought it, this lot became a corner lot, which requires a 25-foot setback from both sides facing right-of-way. So the property was grandfathered, and the existing house is currently grandfathered. However, now he's proposing an addition, which would be built right in this location, and he wants to have an 8-foot setback. The ordinance would require that it be a 25-foot setback. So in order to allow for the addition, he needs to get approval of this variance request for the proposed addition, while the existing house is grandfathered and can remain that way forever. He needs this in order to build that addition. This is
When the
Yeah, but
when the house was originally built,
met-
it met the requirements?
Correct.
And so he got grandfathered because they expanded the road?
Correct.
But if you enlarge the house, doesn't that take the grandfathering away the minute you do something
Our
with it?
ordinance currently allows for existing structures to remain grandfathered pretty much forever, even if they add on to it, as long as the addition meets the required setbacks. So he does not need a variance for the existing house, he only needs a variance for the addition that he wants to add on to it. The addition, if it were to be 25-foot setback, he wouldn't need a variance, even for the existing house.
No, but it wouldn't be behind his house then.
I'm sorry?
No, but the addition wouldn't be behind his house then.
Yeah, it would be very too much to the east side of the property, and it'd be, and he does have a garage right here. It'd push the addition probably back in this area, where right now he's wanting to build it pretty much.
Right in line with the existing house?
Well, his existing one is 6.1 feet from the property line. The addition he wants to put back 8 feet. An additional 2 feet. So there's going to be a 2-foot jog in the house line alignment with that property line. This is, I'll go back to that. This is Concourse Drive looking at the house. Right here is the property line right in this area. His addition's going to come off about right in here, go out and back. That addition will be 8 feet back. This is actually 6.1 feet. It's actually to no fault of his whatsoever. It's just the fact that the DOT came in, made this right away, made this concourse drive, which changed his setbacks from 25 feet, or from 8 feet to 25 feet.
I would make a motion to approve the variance with the one condition as recommended by staff.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Make a motion to come out of Board of Adjustment.
Do we have a second? Motion and a second to adjourn as a Board of Adjustment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Consent calendar.
The Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine planning and zoning items quickly. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and a vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of the board member or a citizen. The consent agenda for planning and zoning contains the following items: Plan Unit Development Review 0902 Salvation Army, and was recommended approval. Item H is a layout plat for William and Nancy Ewing, Davis Engineering, and that, I believe, was continued. Item I is the first reading and a public hearing of rezoning request for William and Nancy Ewing, same thing. Item J is the first reading and public hearing of ordinance amendment Vernard, and that was recommended to be continued. Item K is the Spring Creek Watershed Management and Project Implementation Plan, First Amendment of a Participation Agreement, SPC 2012 PC 77.
Does anyone wish any of the items on the consent agenda removed?
Mr. Chair, make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented by the planning director.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item L.
Item L is a correction of a relocation of a section line 1401 for Tim and Penny Milborn, Marv Matkins as the agent, to amend the public access and the utility line. This is a very interesting situation. Back in 1996, they did do a section line relocation. And part of the discussion was that they relocated to the, there was even discussion in the minutes that said it was to be relocated to the right-of-way. However, when they did the exhibit, they put it on the very northern end of the property, and they drew an exhibit that is not drawn to scale. This line was not on here, and they showed it to be right along here. However, part of the relocation is that they get the house out of the right-of-way. If they would have drawn the section line relocation to scale, the house, this is where it would be, and it would actually be about right in here. It would still be, the home would still be in the right-of-way. So I believe their intent was to relocate it to the right-of-way of Highway 385, which is here, and Taylor Ranch Road, which is in this location. And that was even part of the minutes, it was part of the discussion, is that is what they wanted to do. So this would be the exhibit that would relocate it from this section line right-of-way to Highway 385 and to Taylor Ranch Road. And I believe that is what I believe was intended with that back in 1996. So what I'm asking is that you just accept this as what, and they can get this filed and recorded with that document with Register of Deeds to correct that house still being located in the section line right-of-way.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of remembering way back then, but a lot of this is dinging a bell, and I remember the conversation about this, and I remember conversation after the fact of they put it in the wrong direction, and why it was never changed, I don't have a clue. But I think the planning director's on the right track, that that's where it was meant to be, but it didn't get there.
Okay, so
So I need a motion to recommend that this document be filed and recorded with Register of Deeds to replace that exhibit that was attached to it at that time.
This thing.
So Mr. Chair, I move to accept the redrawn section line relocation document showing it to be relocated to the right-of-way of Taylor Ranch Road in
And-
385.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item M.
Item M is administrative building permit review for Travis and Amanda Frink. This is in regards to a land that was deeded by Eloquent Portion, being the northwest quarter of the northwest quarter. And what these applicants are asking, because when this was deeded, the property typically would be 40 acres. However, when it was filed with equalization, they took out the right-of-way for this property, thus making it less than 40 acres. So this has been before you once before. At that time, it was just last year. At that time, you recommended that they do an ordinance amendment. However, we put that on hold when we started doing the comprehensive plan. So we're asking again for another administrative review to allow this property to be just under the 40 acres in the general ag zoning district. And possibly get approval to move actually ahead with that ordinance amendment, because the comprehensive plan seems to be taking a while to get moving ahead with that. So I'd ask that we move ahead with this actually ordinance amendment so this doesn't happen again.
And what are you going to have the amendment say?
We'll look at the specific language, but if a property is being deeded eloquently, it's being the northwest quarter or the northwest quarter, that if it's less than the 40 acres because of the dedication of right-of-way of a section line, that they would still recognize it as a legal lot in that zoning district if it's just under 40 acres. And the only reason it's under is because of the dedication of that
I thought that
right-of-way.
was already in there, but if it's not, it needs to be.
How much under 40 acres is this?
It's 39.25, and it's required to be 40 acres. So they took out 3/4 of an acre for right-of-way.
What's the motion to approve the administrative review for an issue of building permit 14-0162?
Second.
Exactly that. And to move ahead with an ordinance amendment to correct this.
I think that's two
situation.
separate motions.
We can do that.
So, do we have a motion, or are we just talking about a motion?
I think I made a motion.
And you seconded it, okay. And the question of two separate motions?
Well, he wanted us to go ahead and authorize a changing of the ordinance, but I don't think that should be part of these folks' motion.
I guess I took that to be forward thinking that that would occur another time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you need a motion even for that.
Just go ahead and do it.
But the motion,
We can always say no.
okay, so we're clear on the motion that we have, and is there any more discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Item N is a discussion of vacation home rentals per the Planning Commission's motion on April 14th. What this is, this was discussed over the last couple of Planning Commission meetings to move ahead with an ordinance amendment that would, currently our ordinance says that upon revocation, upon sale or transfer of a piece of property, the CUP for a vacation home rental is revoked. And that was for all residential zoning districts. So what we're looking at is just having that continue only for a suburban residential district, that it only be revoked in that zoning district. But it would amend the ordinance to say that if you're zoned low-density residential district, limited ag, or general ag, there is no automatic revocation. This had come up a number of times. We had a piece of property owner that wanted to get a conditional use permit for a vacation home rental, but the new owner was, or there was somebody buying the property, they wanted assurance that when they bought it, they would have a conditional use permit for a vacation home rental. But they couldn't do it. The previous owner, or the current owner, had to go through the conditional use permit. Then the property was sold, CUP was revoked. Then the new owner had to go through the exact same process in order to have that vacation home rental on the property. This, if we do this ordinance amendment, would eliminate that process, other than in a suburban residential district where it would still be automatically revoked.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I was set in on the discussion on this item in the Planning Commission meeting, and I think, as you know, that I was probably one of the most outspoken ones against certain things in this vacation home rental. But I would request that we leave the suburban residential strictly alone the way it's written. But I do agree that we should do something with the other zoning areas. I think it's probably wrong the way that we have it written, and I think I was part of the people that made it wrong. So it's probably not the right thing to do. So I'd like to see you change the ag, limited ag, low-density residential, so the conditional use permit falls with the land rather than with the individual.
Mr. Chairman, I disagree with that. I don't have a problem with doing away with the revocation part of it, but at least then trigger a review of that, so we can at least look at the people who are doing it.
And that was the intent when the ordinance was written, and that's what the Planning Commission had discussed too, of still having at least a review, but not an automatic revocation.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Where are you in this?
So I guess I would like a motion to proceed with writing up the actual ordinance amendment and doing the advertising, because it does have to be advertised, and bring it back to the Planning Commission for a recommendation, and then bring it back to the county board for an actual ordinance amendment.
That's my motion, Mr. Chair, exactly the way Karen has it written up.
Second. We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Is there any reason that if you draft up whatever it is you're thinking about changing, that people could look that over ahead of time? Because you go through all the process of advertising the hearing and all of that, and then somebody's got a problem with a portion of it, and now we're backing up.
No, actually, when we do an ordinance amendment, revisions can be made throughout the process, only to that section, and we can certainly do that.
Well, I know that, but you know, you maybe eliminate getting a lot of people fired up if we look at it before we advertise it.
I can certainly do that. If you want me to bring it back to the county board before we actually do the ordinance amendment, I can do that.
I just think it might eliminate some controversy when we're advertising it and bringing a whole bunch of people in here that's going to get upset about it if it's not something that the board's going to move forward with anyway.
Anyone else have any comments?
You know, to answer that, Don, Jim Peterson, Hill City, we've had 3 meetings with the other board already on this, and, you know, that's been in the minutes and published and stuff, so I'm not sure there's people that are against the SRD part of it here, and I think everybody's been there already, but, you know, just FYI, I guess, this is the 4th time we're at it here.
Yeah, it was discussed at previous planning commissions, never in front of county board in regards to this exact amendment, but it was discussed at planning commission. There were people there that had, from the committee, that was part of that vacation home rental committee, that had heard this, and I don't believe they have any issues with that, this particular ordinance amendment.
Anyone else?
How are you?
Vern Vollmer, I was one of the members that helped write the ordinance originally. And one of the concerns we had was foreign ownership of the Black Hills. We could have a multinational company somewhere in Mexico or Switzerland, for all we know, come in and buy up all of these properties. And that was one of the reasons we were concerned. We needed to know who's going to be renting out these vacation home rentals.
Okay.
Part of the ordinance amendment we'd still do the review, which would still, part of that review would require the new property owner to send out letters to those surrounding property owners, notifying them of the new local contact. And that is part of our ordinance also. And that's the way I would write up the ordinance amendment.
Okay, anything else? We do have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. That completes, so we're on item 28, executive session. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair, to go into executive session with personnel and contracts.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Motion and a second to adjourn as executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we are on item 29. Jay, do you have some
Thank you,
counsel
Mr.
for us?
Chairman. Jay Alderman with the State's Attorney's Office. The motion I'd ask the board to consider at this time would be a motion authorizing the board chair's signature on an agreement or contract with Respect to accomplish task number 4, which is completing water quality monitoring in an amount of $10,681. Respect will draft the agreement for that for the chairperson's signature.
Do we have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This motion will be to continue the monitoring, is that correct? That's already in place?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, any other discussion? Did you wish to come up and comment, sir? I didn't know if you were tying your shoe or.
Commissioners, I'm Jared Oswald from Respec. Yeah, this monitoring will allow us to continue monitoring during the month of May and get things going, actually month of May all the way through September, which is the rec season. So we appreciate your consideration on this.
As I understand that the DNR has told us, Brittany, that we have to monitor on those dates, correct?
That is correct, sir. The recreation season for the state of South Dakota DNR is May through September, and so we should get going here in May.
Okay, any other comments? From the commission, from the public? Hearing none, we have the motion and a second, correct?
Yes.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried, 4-1. Items from the chair, I think, I don't have anything further, so we can go to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports? We'll start with Commissioner Troutman.
I just want to remind everyone that next meeting on May 20th at 9:30, we'll be doing the cornerstone dedication. Holly has sent out some press releases. We have made invitations out to folks. This will be, hopefully, a nice day with no rain. But if that happens, we'll adjust. But I think it'll be a really it'll be a nice event because it reflects what we did in dedicating the cornerstone on the courthouse in 1922, and it'll be the same type of ceremony again. So repeats history.
I want you in a long dress and a bonnet.
Oh.
1922. I want the real thing. Kind of like the time this commission decided for Halloween that they dress up in judges' robes and white wigs. Huh? White wigs.
Okay, do you have anything further?
That would be it.
Commissioner Holloway?
I don't have anything.
No, sir.
I'll pass.
Same here. So we're done with committee reports. Items from the public. Anyone from the public wish to address the commission?
Dan Richer. Mr. Chairman, I was kind of spaced it off what was going on last meeting, but I did review the tape, and I have to agree with Commissioner Buskerud concerning the memo that was released by HR on having debate for the civil servants. I didn't talk to many old timers, but I talked to several old timers, and in fact, one went back 45 years, and none of them could remember this ever occurring before. They didn't say it didn't, they just said they had no recollection of it. By doing this, or letting this continue, you are by de facto making the civil servants a special group of people. Because in his memo, he says the public is invited, but questions will be about employee questions and concerns. I don't know how many man hours or supplies or mailings or whatever that costs, but there was never a resolution or a motion or anything made on that. So I do have a concern about that particular item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items from the public?
Motion to adjourn?
Second. A motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.